Sweet. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Today I'm in a slightly different setting, and I also have an actual in-person guest today. Would you like to introduce yourself?
My name is Eva Marie, and I try to educate and give tips on DID itself.
Perfect. I hope you guys can hear us and everything. I'm actually going to check it right now. But yeah, so I had the opportunity to spend the weekend in Eva's guest cabin, and honestly, my perspective of DID has changed immensely. It's being able to, for example, I was able to meet Alter 6, and it was very different than I imagined it would be. I kind of thought it would be like an adult acting like a child, but I was talking to a child. It kind of, I'm sorry that we're so far away. I might bring it forward a little bit.
Okay.
But bagels and such. I mean, other than that, I love it.
It's a home.
Do you want to talk a little bit about what we're going to be?
Yes. I think what we'll do is we'll start out with probably beginners with DID, what kind of books that we can recommend. When you end up with DID, you kind of want to start out with the work behind it first before really getting into the diagnostics of it. So I think what we'll do is we'll just take each book step by step, and if you have questions, you're more than welcome to ask.
Epic.
I think we will stick with the essay work first, what books are good for essay. I also have books that are just stories that you can dig into. I've read over 288 books on DID, BPD, PTSD, CPTSD, and even foster carrier books. So
That's amazing.
yeah. So I think what we'll begin with is probably, because I have boy books here and I have girl books here, and I even have gender fluid books here. So let me look here. As far as stories, and most of these are my favorites, so we'll be able to touch bases with them. One of my first books that I probably would like to recommend is Beyond the Open Well.
Awesome.
And it is done by a true story of Bright Meadow and Desert Princess. And the cool thing about this book is it talks in great detail on the essay journey they go through with abuse. And it even has, which I found really cool, Michelle, is they show the pictures of these two girls and their brother. And in the beginning, they're actually adopted because of the severe abuse they go through. And they talk about their growing up, having children. And unfortunately, they're passed away now, but the book is really neat. It's based out of, let's see here, out of Wisconsin, and
Wow.
they end up going in different locations like Cornell, things like that. So, and I'll read you the bio here, which is really interesting.
Sweet.
So begins the true story of the lives of Sister Joyce West and Jane McDaniel over the span of six decades. Their story is fascinating and compelling. Early abuses and neglects negatively influence their lives even today. In these pages, the sisters bravely talk about a subject that is too often kept a secret, which you and me know that.
Right.
Most people don't want to talk about their abuse in detail and give a description of what they went through. And that's where the bravery comes in, where you step in and say, hey, I'm going to talk about this.
Right.
Ultimately, it is their hope that by telling of their story, they may shed light on the subject of abuse and encourage other sufferers to overcome and live a prosperous life. And then in the last paragraph here it states, if you listen carefully, you can hear the sound of silence. It is your own heartbeat echoing deep inside your ears. It is the vibration of life that is sometimes felt in the stillness of the night. It is the unspoken assurance that you are not alone in your fear or your joy.
Wow.
So, and I'm trying to think the date on that. It's an older book, in 2008 when it was published.
Wow.
So, and the person that published it was out of Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin, and it's a friend of theirs.
That's amazing.
So, yeah, it's a very good book. I love this.
Recommend.
I think Yes, I've read it probably 3 or 4 times.
Really?
I loved it that much.
That's
yeah.
amazing.
So that's a good beginner's book if you're not looking into wanting to learn, the dynamics of essay work. So,
Right.
and it's the same. And this one, Michelle, is another one of my favorites. It's
If
called
you want, I can read
The
the back of
Hospital.
it.
Yeah. And this one is actually it's another true story. You can go on YouTube and look up Barbara O'Hare, and you can actually watch her documentary about this book.
Okay.
So, and I'm going to let Michelle read the back.
Sweet. Nobody knew what was going on behind those doors. We were human toys, just a piece of meat for somebody to play with. Barbara O'Hare was just 12 when she was admitted to the psychiatric hospital, Aston Hall, in 1971. From a troubled home, she'd hoped she would find sanctuary there. But within hours, Barbara was... Trigger warning, right?
Yeah.
Should we do a little trigger warning?
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about essay,
essay.
all sorts of horrible things that can
Physical
cause
abuse.
all sorts of trauma, including dissociative identity disorder.
Yes.
A truth-telling drug, and then abused by the head physician, Dr. Kenneth Milner. The terrifying drug experimentation and relentless abuse that lasted throughout her stay damaged her for life, but somehow Barbara clung on to her inner strength and eventually found herself leading a campaign to determine answers for potentially hundreds of victims. A shocking account of how vulnerable children were preyed on by a doctor entrusted with their care, and that's why it must never happen again. That's amazing.
It is. The fact that she helped hundreds of people to take down this hospital, this psych ward, is so courageable. And
That's crazy.
Yeah.
We're like showing off the book.
Yeah,
Hello!
it's
Thank you guys so much for being here. It's very much appreciated. That's amazing.
Yes, that's a neat one.
Yeah.
And then another one I really enjoyed. This will be just another, again, a story. And this one is about Catherine McCall. And when I read this one, I read it twice. I actually forgot that I had read it because alters also like to read. So it was like I was reading it again, and then it was funny because like in between like half the book, I feel like I've read this before. And it was like, okay, maybe I have read this before. So that's the other fun thing with the old noggin here. But this is about sexual abuse and her stepfather. And it is odd how they hold their stance on, what would you call that when a family wants to be higher up, where they kind of depict themselves as...
like a hierarchy?
Yeah. So her dad is like this doctor, and he's the perfect doctor, and he's holding this stance, and here he's abusing his daughter. It's
Wow.
like, why? So I'll let you read the back of this one. This one's a very good one as well.
Okay. Beneath the facade of what happened to an all-American upper-middle-class upbringing at 763 Montgomery Place, young Catherine McCall was being AR'd repeatedly by her father. In this gut-wrenching true story of survival and triumph, McCall shares her life with readers in 2 parts, her childhood memories of abuse and her adulthood road to recovery. In this heartfelt memoir, Catherine McCall writes in clear and moving language about the devastation that her father wreaks upon her and her family, about childhood days that turn into frightening nights. Tentative at first, McCall's compelling voice gains strength as she embarks upon the long journey of healing. What we ultimately hear when the piano stops is the sound of a woman's voice grown powerful, lucid, forgiving, and true. Catherine McCall tells her story of incestuous R and abuse with remarkable grace and passion, and with the dispassionate eye of the professional therapist that she is. She also writes with passionate soul of a contemplative who has wrestled with the wounding, destructive relationships and discovered the path towards healing. You will find it here in the memoir of exceptional courage, endurance, and faith. When the Piano Stops, Catherine McCall has the courage to tell the deeply personal details of her life and the changes she has been through. In a profound, poignant, and sometimes painful way, she opens the path for us, the readers, to draw from her journey. We take what we can use from her and leave the rest. She shares the gift of herself, her pain, her fear, her shame, and her not knowing. She also shares her spiritual victory and joy. What more could we ask of a writer? Read it. And that's from Patrick T. Malone, MD, author of The Art of Intimacy. So yeah, that's amazing.
Well,
Wow.
it was interesting too because like the abuse, the reason she calls it When the Piano Stops is because during the abuse, he's trying to detour her brain from the abuse. So he literally plays piano while he's abusing her.
Oh.
So it's like that's why she calls it When the Piano Stops. So when she starts healing from this sexual abuse, she literally has to stop that noise in her head and heal from it. So it's a really great read. Great
That's
read.
amazing. Recommend.
So, do we have any questions yet?
Not yet. I
Not
can ask
yet.
you a few questions.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
Let me see here. I mean, I don't have any specific questions related to the books yet.
That's okay. I can go more on about the books too if you want me to.
Yeah, sure. Let's go on with the books for now.
We'll go to what books? Oh, I never thought I should give the perspective of the male side.
Sure. Perfect.
So I think what we'll get into, and this guy here was actually on Oprah. He's been on, I think, Donahue, all that. And that is David Pelzer. So David Pelzer was a severely, severely abused child. And their first book was a child called It.
Yeah.
And, oh, Michelle, the amount, I will warn you, trigger warning, do not get these books unless your therapist says you're prepared for it, because the abuse that he endures, he doesn't suffer any sexual abuse, but he does physical abuse.
Okay.
And he fights his whole life with this mother that is so neglectful and so abusive. She starves him, she tortures him, she makes the other kids pick on him. So, and that's actually a New York Times #1 bestseller. So, and then,
Wow.
yeah.
Amazing.
So, and I'll let you have a look at that if you decide you want to read a little of it. And there is a part 2 and a part 3 where it goes into his teenhood and into his adulthood, where he actually, I think it's the Navy.
That's amazing.
The Navy. He's a fighter. He likes to fly. So he talks about that when he joins, I think it's the Navy or Marines.
Wow. He was brutally beaten and starved by his emotionally unstable alcoholic mother, a mother who played torturous, unpredictable games that left him nearly dead. He has learned how to play his mother's games in order to survive, because she no longer considered him a son but a slave, and no longer a boy but an it. Dave's bed was an old army cot in the basement, and his clothes were torn and raunchy. His mother allowed him the luxury of food. It was nothing more than spoiled scraps that even the dogs refused to eat. The outside world knew nothing of his living nightmare. He had nothing and no one to turn to, but his dreams kept him alive. That's actually something I see a lot with trauma and DID, like the continuation of hope, and it's outstanding.
Well, and the sad part is, a lot of people say, DID is the worst case scenario.
Sure.
And it really isn't, Michelle. It is actually the people that don't have DID that can suffer more. So like him, he remembers all this abuse and he has to deal with it. And there's so many parts in his story where he's just giving up,
Yeah, I mean, exactly. It's not like at first you're like, no, I can do this. It's a lifelong journey.
Yeah. Well, and he even, they give a little bit of a bio here where it says David Pelzer travels throughout the nation promoting and inspiring resilience. His unique accomplishments have garnered commendations from President Reagan, Bush, Clinton. In 1994, he was the only American who received the Outstanding Young Person's of the World Award. David also carried Centennial Olympic torch. So it's like, wow, they really put him out there. And if you want to know more about him, he's also on Oprah. There's documentary about it. Tons and tons of research
Yeah,
on
he
this
was
guy.
on Oprah.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So if you're a man going through, these kind of problems, I recommend all three. I think it's a great read. It gives an idea how to keep going along and keep your what do you want to call it, Michelle? Journey.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
hope.
Yeah.
This is amazing. I definitely
Yeah.
want to read these ASAP. I don't know.
And I guess as far as DID work, because I'm a female, I haven't read a lot on the male aspect of things.
Sure.
But I found Robert B. Oxman to be really good. It's called A Fractured Mind.
Yes.
And his book, how do I put this? I'm not mathematically inclined, and I don't speak Chinese. But this guy, he has alters that do that kind of work, and he talks tremendously of how they help him to become a success in working with depicting the language and the math behind it, all that. So that I'll let you have a look at that and maybe read the bio on that.
We have one question. Will there be a
Sure.
list of these books somewhere? I know they may be hard reads, but it's such important stories. Yeah, we can list
Yeah.
literally all of these books in the
Yeah,
description.
we
and
totally can
comments.
do that. Yep.
After the video, will do. Okay. So praise for a fractured mind. I met Bob Oxnam on my first day on Today in 1976 when news about the death of Mayo, cannot pronounce, reached the West. I knew what happened about China then. What I knew about China then, I wouldn't have filled a teacup. But as a seasoned scholar and world traveler, Bob Oxnam was known by every major news organization in the country. I was privileged to be among the first he trusted. With his secret, A Fractured Mind is a story I urged him to tell. And someone else says, in this deeply moving book, Robert Oxnam,
I think so.
I'm sorry if I mispronounce, courageously shares with the reader the secret inner life of those who suffer with multiple personality. I mean, when this was written.
Yeah.
As the world's renowned Asia scholar, Oxnam reveals how someone who appeared so successful and talented on the outside can be filled with overwhelming self-hatred and mysterious internal demons. Marlene Steinberg, MD. Okay, next one. A spiritual and psychological thriller that you simply won't be able to put down. The Wise, Courageous book is nothing less than a triumph of human spirit. Forrest Church, author of Freedom of Fear. And last one. This compelling and deeply moving story provides fresh insight into the vulnerability, complexity, and resilience of the psyche and the meaning of the quest for wholeness. That's amazing. Stephen C. Rockefeller, professor of religion at Miss. Yes, perfect.
And the thing is, Michelle, some people say, oh, why do you read older material? But the thing is, the older material gives you an insight of how the history begun and then how it travels into more learning and more experiencing and what's good and what isn't good. And so when you read stuff like that, you actually get an idea of how to adjust to things that are from your past.
Wow.
And so that's why I love reading some of these older stories with people that have been through this, because some of these people are integrated or they're healed from it. So you're getting an idea of how they made that journey,
Absolutely.
So that's a great read. Another thing I wanted to get into is gender fluid, because gender fluid issues are a huge issue right now. People are dealing with that problem. And especially for the younger adults and teens, they get confused. They don't know what to do. And they can get confused and actually think I have DID.
Right, gender identity.
Yeah, exactly.
Identity disturbance.
And I found, and this is one thing I really promote because I have read all her books, and that is Cathy Glass. Cathy Glass is a foster carrier out of the UK, and I have read her whole series, which I think there's like 20, 30 books, and she's still writing. And each child that she puts in these books suffers from some sort of abuse, neglect, SA issues, you name it. She deals with it. Autism, diabetes, weight
Wow.
issues. And this book here is called Finding Stevie. And it's actually about a gender fluid kid who's being fostered because I do believe it's his family, they don't want to accept it. So I'm going to let you read the back of that one.
Sweet. One remarkable woman, over 25 years of fostering, care to more than 150 children. When I was told Stevie, aged 14, was gender fluid, I wasn't sure what that term meant and looked it up on the internet. Stevie and his younger brother and sister had been brought up by their grandparents as their mother was in prison. But the grandparents could no longer cope with Stevie's behavior, so they placed him in foster care. Like many of us, Stevie spent time online, and I warned him about the dangers of talking to strangers and how to stay safe. When his younger siblings told their grandmother they had a secret they couldn't tell, I was concerned. But nothing could have prepared me for the truth. When Stevie finally broke down and confessed to me what he had done.
It's such a great read. And the fact that she touches bases with so many different perspectives of these children is, I think, what I enjoyed the best about Cathy Glass.
That's amazing.
And she doesn't just do boys, she does girl books, she does even children that end up pregnant or have issues, but
Wow.
we'll touch that in a minute. And two more, I'll do these two next. I actually have 4 of them that are based on teenagers and children. And the age variation, she'll take on babies that are neglected or abused, or she'll take on 3-year-olds, 6-year-olds, 8-year-olds, 12-year-olds, and
That's amazing.
she puts them each in a book. She'll change the name, of course, to protect the child, but, there's just so many, Oscar's here, his experience, there's alarm bell ringing, he's hungry, unkept. She'll have children show up in her home with no clothes, no toys.
Oh my God.
And she's got to figure out because foster carriers can't persuade them to talk. So she talks about how she deals with getting them to speak. And her methods are used in even my therapy. Her methods can be used to get a child to talk about something. One example, a child doesn't like to be seen when they're talking about their abuse. So she found that driving in a car or talking to them while they're watching TV, just slight questions, and a child will openly start talking about their abuse or neglect. And then this is used to help the child, to save the child, to get them out of a situation that they don't need to be in.
Yeah.
So,
Jordan says, people forgetting history are doomed to repeat it. People learn from their ancestors. Even the hard times give you such insight. Absolutely.
oh, that's well said, Jordan. Thank you. Yes, history will repeat itself if it is not.
Absolutely.
Studied.
Generational trauma.
Exactly. And these are the 4 boy books. If you don't have to read them if you don't want to, or if you want to show them, that's fine too.
Wow.
Let's see here. This is the hard part. I'm gonna put these over here by you. Okay, now we want to cover.
Whatever you are inclined.
It's a good thing I marked everything.
Unless you want to say the options and people can pick.
That's true too. We can try to do that. And I think what we'll do next, since you have an idea of some of the regular books to read, as far as essay work, I guess as far as female side of it, if you really want to do some, well, actually male too. Christine Cortez is I would say the queen of essay work. She does a lot of talking about CPTSD, PTSD, BPD, and even a little bit of DID. And her
Amazing.
methods are amazing. So I would definitely recommend Christine Cortez's work. Keep in mind, I don't have all the books because, unfortunately, Michelle, when I read them, I keep the ones that are my favorite, and then the rest I donate to my place that I have therapy.
That's fair.
So I like to share the books to help others. So
That's amazing. I mean, can't get you there.
any questions?
I don't think I have any questions to get you at the moment.
Okay.
I'm curious about these books, to be honest.
Okay. So, more essay work. So these are books that are going to be more of a learning stance. So to help you to start out, DID is a process.
Sure.
So when you start out learning about DID, you don't want to just jump into the psychology books and read tremendously on it. You kind of want to start out where you begin. And that is the abuse you went through, whether it be say religious, self-harm, Munchausen, you name it. So you kind of want to more or less research based on your experience of where you want to begin.
Yeah.
You know. So one book that seems to be hitting the charts pretty high, even though it's a little bit older book, is Waking the Tiger.
Yes, love it.
And Waking the Tiger is done by Peter A. Levine, or it's either Levine or Levine. I'm not sure which one it is there. And as you can see, I use it quite a bit extensively to research over and over and over. And I actually did a video on this, so if you're interested, you can go on my channel and check that out. Some of these books you'll see are repeated because I repeat them in my channel.
Sure.
But he talks about, the mystery of trauma. You know, so it's a mystery.
Wow.
Grounding techniques, somatic arousal experience. Oh, Michelle, somatic arousal is so intense. You know, you actually think when you have a somatic symptom, and not even with DID, any kind of mental health disorder, it is so real.
Yeah,
You know?
absolutely.
Yeah, you actually feel it. It's amazing. He talks about disassociation, and I think you all know probably how that out-of-body experience works. It's not fun. It's like you're viewing your own trauma over and over.
Right.
So he talks about that in
Wow,
here.
amazing.
Yeah. Symptoms from trauma, and hypervigilance. So, and there's so much more in here. I mean, it would take me forever to go through all this. And he actually has some charts and stuff in here too you can look at. And I'm going to let Michelle do more talking on this one while I
Sweet.
find the next one.
Nature's Lessons in Trauma Healing. Waking the Tiger offers a new and hopeful vision of trauma. It views the human animal as a unique being, endowed with the instinct capability to heal as well as the intellectual spirit to harness this innate capacity. It asks and answers an intriguing question. Why are animals in the wild, though threatened routinely, rarely traumatized? By understanding the dynamics that make wild animals virtually immune to traumatic symptoms, the mystery of human trauma is revealed. Waking the Tiger normalizes symptoms of trauma and the steps needed to heal them. People are often traumatized by seemingly ordinary experiences. The reader is taken on a guided tour of the subtle yet powerful impulses that govern our responses to overwhelming life events. To do this, it employs a series of exercises that help us focus on bodily sensations. Through a heightened awareness of these sensations, trauma can be healed. People have said, every life contains difficulties we are not prepared for. Read, learn, be prepared for life and healing. Fascinating, amazing, revolutionary exploration of the effects that causes trauma. It is a most important book, quite possibly a work of genius. Levine effectively argues that the body is healer and that psychological scars of trauma are reversible, but only if we listen to the voices of our body. A vital combination of exciting emerging science of mind/body interaction in the treatment of disease. Wow, that is amazing. I'm actually very curious about this.
I think the coolest part is they actually compare it with animal instincts. You know, people don't realize that, you know, we are in that sort of field of even though we're on the highest of the food chain, but you think about it, you watch nature documentaries and you see an animal being attacked by another animal. And if you watch closely, you'll see that fight, flight, or freeze response.
Correct.
And he does such a great job with that book showing that and talking about that. And I love it. And I've heard so many good things about that book. It's helped a lot of people. Therapists use it. So
Amazing. That's so cool.
yeah. So the next book I want to talk about, which they do, it's based on the LGBT community. And we have Ellen Bass and Linda Laura Davis, sorry.
Amazing.
And they talk about SA work in their book. And as you can see, again, lots of studying. And in the back, they show a picture, and I'll have Michelle read this in a second. And the cool thing about these books is they keep updating it off and on. And you can actually get a workbook that goes with it. So if you want to do work in your therapy setting with your therapist or psychologist, even though it's an older book, it is still heavily used in therapy because they have so many strategies in here. They talk about the stages of healing, emergency stages, which I did a video on. A lot of people get stuck in that chaotic phase, and it's like black and white thinking where they just are not happy. They don't want to continue to do all the work. Talking about family, telling family, forgiving. Forgiving is a huge thing with that. Let's see here. They also give guidelines on dealing with holidays. And that's something a lot of people don't talk about is the holiday drama. And with DID, I think that's the hardest thing because you got to make a choice. Do you want to go and what if you switch?
Right.
What if somebody sees you? So
crowds of people.
Exactly. My own personal experience, I find always have a bathroom or room planned ahead of time so you can, if you know something's going to happen, you run to that particular room so they can't see your spell, and things like that. But okay, well, I'll give you this book and let you do some work on that while I find the next one.
The Courage to Heal is an inspiring, comprehensive guide that offers hope and encouragement to every woman who was sexually abused as a child and those who care about her. Although the effects of child sexual abuse are long-term and severe, healing is possible. The authors weave personal experience with professional knowledge to show the reader how she can come to terms with her past while moving powerfully into the future. They provide clear explanations, practical suggestions, a map of the healing journey, and many moving first-person examples of recovery process drawn from their interviews with hundreds of survivors. Definitive in scope, the Courage to Heal speaks directly to the survivor in a warm and personal way, taking stock, addressing the question, am I a survivor? And outlines the effects of child sexual abuse and the way women cope over time. The healing process explores each stage from the decision to heal and remembering through breaking silence, knowing it wasn't your fault, nurturing the inner child and grief and anger, to resolution and moving on. Changing patterns offers in-depth guidance for shifting self-defeating patterns in specific areas of one's present life, including self-esteem, feelings, intimacy, sexuality, and dealing with families. Supporters of survivors provides insight and strategies for partners of survivors, family members, and counselors. Courageous Women profiles survivors who share the challenges and triumphs of their healing journeys. Resource guide, fully updated for this edition, informs readers about therapy, healing activities, recommended reading, support groups, self-help programs, and services and organizations.
It's a huge one. They got a lot of resources too. That's awesome.
This is amazing.
Yeah, that I would say that is definitely a beginner's book. I mean, for all, it's
beginners.
Yeah, definitely. Especially with the workbooks, and as you can see, I have tons of things checked off, and I'm a busy girl.
Every page that I turn
Every
to.
page, yes.
That's amazing, though.
But there's so much to learn from it,
Flashbacks.
So, yeah.
Remembering what it's like. That's amazing.
I love the questions in there, too. And the workbook has so many things you can work with your therapist. I think the coolest part about something like this is that you can actually build a trust with your therapist, get to know them,
Exactly.
Great book. Great book.
Perfect. That's amazing.
So, another one is, if you've been through incest, is Healing the Incest Wound. And that's by Christine Cortez. And I talk highly about her in a lot of my own videos.
Perfect.
And if you want to, research her on YouTube. She has tons and tons of videos on a lot of stuff. And her healing process is so detailed. I mean, in this book, she actually talks about even going with one of her clients to have an exam, because that
Amazing.
client is so petrified of going into a hospital and having to have a clinical checkup. And this person has been so abused that she's having physical issues. And so sometimes therapists or psychologists will step over that boundary just a bit, keeping a professional stance, and then go with that person to help them to get through one of the hardest things they've ever been
That's
through.
amazing.
It is. It's so amazing. And I'm going to let you scroll through this and do some reading on that.
Perfect. Increasing numbers of people, primarily women, who were abused incestually as children are now seeking therapy for problems related to their abuse. This book provides the special knowledge and clinical guidelines that therapists need to help them. As documented here both by statistics and by the survivor's own voice, incest is unfortunately not rare apparent happening, but a common childhood experience of a substantial minority of all children. Since incest is generally hidden and denied, the victims are left to cope with their reactions in an atmosphere that contradicts the reality of their experience. Not all incest is the same. In the first section, Christine A. Cortez, I'm sorry, provides a general introduction to incest by category, type, characteristics, and family and individual dynamics, such as knowledge is essential for therapists hoping to understand the unique aspects of their clients' incest experiences. The symptoms, short-term, thereafter, and long-term secondary elaborations of incest are next explained by 4 perspectives: traumatic stress or victimization theory, developmental theory, feminist theory, and loss theory. Cortez's sensitive discussion of the diagnostic process shows how multiple presenting concerns may alert the clinician to incest in the client's past. The final section describes the salient issues and strategies of incest therapy, which may involve a combination of individual groups, couples. Absolutely, no, take your time. Of family therapy. Here as elsewhere in the book, cases, vignettes illustrates the therapeutic process. Christine A. Cortez, PhD, a counseling psychologist in private practice of Washington, D.C. An unusually open presentation of a variety of therapeutic approaches.
Okay.
No, you're fine. This is just a treatment manual. This is not a treatment manual, but a valuable resource book. That's from David Finnicor, PhD, Family Research Laboratory, University of New Hampshire. That was amazing.
It is.
I can see why you're recommending all these books. It's like I want to read every single one.
They're very good. They're very good. You know, and that's the thing about it. She does amazing work, and I love her work. The only issue is she's getting older, and I think she's kind of retiring, but her work is huge, huge, huge. So, and I'm sorry I had to leave you for a minute, children.
No, you're fine.
Anyway, there's a few other ones that are based on essay abuse that I found very useful. And this one is called A Primer on the Complexities of Traumatic Memory of Childhood Essay Abuse. And it's the psychobiological approach. And it's done by Faye Honey Knopp and Ann Rose Benson. So we have females again.
Amazing.
Which is funny because some people have they keep saying, males write the books. And, I'm kind of a bug when it comes to digging for female literature because I want both perspectives, So there's this one.
Absolutely.
And then this one here is Sexual Abuse in the Lives of Women Diagnosed with Serious Mental Illness. And as you can see, I really dug into this one. It had really great research. And I'm hoping they do an update on this one because it had, and here's the thing, with DID, you end up with CPTSD. Well, a lot of times the assessments will start with PTSD, then they move to CPTSD, and if you have CPTSD, then they know they can move to DID or BPD, vice versa. And this book talks about PTSD treatment, cognitive behavioral therapy, PTSD symptoms, and they actually talk about the difference between BPD combined with PTSD. That's crazy. There's a whole section on that. They talk about groups about how to deal with self-harm. And, medications are a huge thing too. And sometimes medications can mess you up or fix you up. And in this book, they talk about antidepressants and how they stop emotions and the child inside you. So there's a lot of people that don't have DID, but they still feel small and helpless. So they have that response the same as somebody with DID would. It's not a separative personality. So that's interesting.
Kind of like internal family systems.
Yeah, kind of like that. Why is it better? And they even have a section, why is it better sometimes without meds, and how family can make your brain actually believe some of their delusional input. Like a mother can say, well, if you would have did this, I would have loved you more, and you'd actually believe that. And this talks about how to separate that issue.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. This is a good one. Even though it's older, it's good. They have a section on physical symptoms, and again, Michelle, the naughty somatic symptoms.
Love it.
I'm telling you, it's a huge thing. I think another interesting thing is why people in nursing homes can't help and over-medicate in the mental health field.
Right.
Nursing homes sometimes find medication is better than sitting down and talking with an older person. So we're even kind of going to bring that into this book.
That's amazing.
Insurance and victim blaming, being disabled and no help to victims. So there's a lot of people who are disabled, they can't afford some things, and this book talks immensely about that as well. And then we have a section that talks about assessing PTSD, DID, and the complexity of that.
Wow.
Oh, this is good too. Cortez is actually a part of this too. That's the thing. You'll find that a lot of these people in these books repeat themselves with other people's literature because these people follow these people.
Right.
Staying mutual at a therapist point. So they're talking about boundaries here. And Christine talks about how the countertransferences, how to keep a good boundary, how bad, boundaries can be stepped over. And this section, the boundaries of helping others, keeping distance. So like a therapist, if you think about it, Michelle, a therapist is a tool, a very good tool.
Absolutely.
And if you get the wrong tool, it's not going to fix the problem.
Man, that's a good comparison.
Yeah. So then you're like, okay, this tool's not working. I need to find a different tool. So then you find a different therapist. And the thing is, just like all of us, we're all different. We all have different issues.
Absolutely. Different
past abuses, traumas. So you got to find a therapist that fits your individual needs.
Absolutely.
And then in a year's time or so, when you find one that does, then you step it up and you start to trust them and you start to use them as that tool. And if they're a good therapist, they won't overstep your boundaries.
Right.
I love that.
That's amazing. That's extremely important to trust your therapist,
Oh, Michelle, look, they even have a male survivors section.
Oh, that's
awesome. I thought it was all female, but it's not. It's got a trauma and trauma recovery for duly diagnosed male survivors. It is. And there's a whole section on it, too. I'd say probably at least, I don't know, 10, 12 pages.
Hi, Moonchild. Thank you for being here.
I'll give you that.
Should I read the back?
You can if you want to.
Sweet. Although a substantial amount of media and professional attention has been devoted to the incidence of sexual abuse at the population at large, the plight of those who have suffered abuse are seriously mentally ill and largely been ignored. Divided into various parts, this important and distinctive work offers chapters on theory and assessment of the abused women, including the services that are available and recommendations for improvement, treatment, including inpatient treatment and cognitive behavioral approaches, and policy and research, which deals with the prevalence and impact of physical and emotional abuse on severely mentally ill women. There is also a section devoted to case studies that are both tragic and devastating. The material in this work is broad enough that its audience will extend beyond clinicians to policymakers and researchers, as well as the interested lay reader. Maxine Harris, with the distinguished contributors, have ensured that sexual abuse in the lives of women diagnosed with serious mental illness will make a valuable contribution to the existing literature on trauma. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's really got a lot in it. It's a little compact book that's got a lot in it.
Oh, this is so cool.
Yeah.
Treatment of PTSD symptoms.
Yeah, and PTSD is a huge part with this, with all mental illness, really, if you think about it, because it all comes with that, you know, especially the BPD, the OSDD, the DID.
This is so cool.
Yeah.
I think this is important to read.
It is.
If you are in the right headspace.
Yes, yes. Well, and that is one thing I'm going to definitely say since we're on a live. Do not get these books without talking to your mental health care professional first to make sure that you're ready
Absolutely.
to dig into this. You know, for me, in the beginning, it was more or less reading stories of people that had similar stories as mine. And then I wanted more. So then I started digging into the heavier books. And then more books, and then pretty soon I was into the psychology books, and you know, you just kind of go from step. So,
Wow.
This one I got into, and it's called "The Primer on the Complexity of Traumatic Memory of Childhood Sexual Abuse," and it's really good. I like it.
Yes.
It's got some stuff in it. Oh, this is a huge thing. The characteristics of trauma. And the thing about trauma is there's actually two kinds. There's trauma 1 and trauma 2.
Really?
Yeah. So, and they give those characteristics, those 4 characteristics
Yes.
in this book, telling you what is considered what's more traumatic than another trauma.
Sure.
And then when they make that assessment, they have to decide where to put you after that. So do they put you in the PTSD category or the CPTSD category?
Wow. That's a good point.
That's how it kind of starts with the assessments of DID, because if you just jump in and say you have DID without doing these trauma-based assessments, it could be damaging to somebody.
Absolutely.
So, and in this book, they also talk about memory and flight response. So depending on how you, like you, if you're in a traumatic situation, you might react differently than I would, obviously. So they talk about the difference between that, why some people, you know, react more to something than another person would.
Absolutely.
They talk about emotional memory and the development in childhood. So that's actually a really good chapter, because child growth is a huge part of who you're going to be in it as an adult. And if that's traumatized, it leaves like this gap and this missing piece in your life.
Absolutely. That's a great point.
Oh yeah. Responses to trauma. And again, that lovely little complex PTSD symptoms.
Perfect. Love it.
Yes.
We should look at that.
Oh, and it also says, and disorders of extreme stress. So it actually talks about the disorders you can get from complex PTSD.
Because it's not just PTSD. There's like,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah, and it actually talks about the DSM in here, the DES testing. So there's a lot in here. Again, those same doctors we're talking about right now on the live, are mentioned in this book, and then some.
Wow.
So they even get into the biology of it.
That's so good.
Oh, and for everybody that has DID, section for you, disassociation and defense dysfunctioning. So that's a great chapter too, and I as you can see, I had it marked. It's really well done.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then they even have a short section of talking about PTSD and DID, if they're what's the difference, how they're the same, what comes with it.
Sure. Wow.
Repeated trauma and DID. Self-identity issues. So
Yeah.
even stuff like that, you know, even if you don't have DID, there's still that issue with self-identity, which seems to be a huge issue after COVID hit. A lot of people are dealing with their identity.
Would you say that like mental illness or trauma in general, you can just have identity disturbance with that in general?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
You know, especially that's where it's hard, because you don't want to get too involved with the teens and the young adults in this, but you want to help them too, and that's the hard part, because they get so fixated on identity. And so I look at it this way. The best thing to do is sit down and talk to them, figure out what's going on with them, and you want to work with that. You don't want to really like cloud it over.
Right, like obsess over it.
I think me as a parent, I find anything my children openly talk to me about, and if there was an identity issue or a gender fluid issue, I would want to know everything about it.
Absolutely.
Just the same as I would this issue, DID. I would read, I would do extensive research to help them.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Oh, they even have a chapter on alters. Alters, what are they? So they describe what alters are in this book.
Wow! Oh my god! That's so cool. So would you say this is a beginner's book or anyone can read it?
Well, I wouldn't put it at a beginner's book because it's more on the psychology of it. So I would say it's more of a once your therapist feels that you can learn more about your disorder kind of book. As far as I guess I would say talk to your mental health care professional. I don't want to say, hey, you got to be at this stage to go to this book because I can't. Everybody's trauma is so different. They even bring in court aspects, statute of limitations. So there's a lot of people that have mental disorders that are going through court right now, and they don't know how to deal with it because I will be upfront and honest about this on a live. Court issues are huge, and they do not bring mental health into the court field.
Right.
So a lot of times you are torn apart in court, and they're not even considering your mental health.
Absolutely.
They're not considering your lifestyle. They're just going off something they feel that you did illegally. So, don't get me wrong. There's people shouldn't do them kind of things and take responsibility. Me, I have DID. Let's give an example. Something that I've never done, but still. Let's say a smaller alter pops out and she steals a sucker in the store.
Sure.
I come home and I realize there's a sucker in my pocket. As an adult, I have to make a decision. Do I let 6 keep the sucker? Or do I take it back to the store and say, okay, this is wrong? Hence, I'm obviously going to take it back and I'm going to say, I'm so sorry, And that's where as a DID system, as an adult, even though you have child alters, you have to make a logic...
moral compass decision?
Yes.
A parent.
As a parent. And that's why I bring in that Colin Ross reparenting role, because you are a parent of your littles. You are a parent of your teens.
Wow.
And you have to educate them and get to know them. And that's hard when you have that amnesic barrier. It takes years and years to do.
Yeah.
So here's that book.
Perfect. This is amazing. If we have trouble recalling details of ordinary events from yesterday or last year, how can we trust memories of traumatic events that have been forgotten and reclaimed decades later? Are there differences in the way our brain receive and store ordinary traumatic memories? Acclaimed author and researcher Faye H. Knopp, a co-author Anna Rose Benson, carefully examined these questions in the clear light of current scientific research. While psychotherapy has long recorded the emotional aftermath of trauma, it is only recently that technology has documented its associated physiological changes in the brain. These changes may have serious impact on how traumatic memories are stored and the extent of which their accuracy may be trusted when recalled. At the complex crossroads of neuropsychological research and psychotherapy, a primer on the complexities of traumatic memory of childhood sexual abuse provides beginners and experienced travelers alike with a guidebook through roads less traveled in the current debate over delayed memories of childhood trauma. People say that I found this book, especially the neuroscience sessions, to be fascinating. It is illuminating, well written, as a comprehensive a review of the subject as I have seen. All those doing child protection work should read it. It's a major contribution to the field, an invaluable primer that successfully manages to make every complex material very clear. very comprehensive and sophisticated, both in the material it covers and in its understanding of the material. Wow, those are great.
Yeah, it's a good book. I definitely enjoyed it. Definitely. Another one I want to bring up, and that is Charles L. Whitfield, MD. Some people don't care for his work. Now, I found it interesting. It's a pretty thick book, and it's basically recovery and psychology. And some of the stuff he gets into, which I was kind of scrolling through while you were reading, and this is something that's not brought up very often in DID or even other mental illnesses, and that is the FMS.
Right.
And the FMS is False Memory Syndrome Foundation.
Yes.
And this foundation took place in like the early 1990s. And basically their idea, and a lot of older people that have DID and some of you that have mental health that are in your ages of probably, I want to say 40 to 60 age, know about the FMS.
Wow.
And what they did is children would say, I'm being abused, I'm being hurt, something's happening to me. And the FMS would cover court costs for the predators and the people that hurt these children. They wanted them to look like they had a false memory. Thank goodness that they've cracked down on that. But
thank God.
Charles Whitfield has a whole chapter on FMS.
Yes,
so,
we have to do a video.
Yeah. So I would think it'd be something you need to get into. And he even has a table of contents here, claims and facts about false memories. So he talks about the facts and the myths, and he's got so many dynamics in here. Even something like this where he has like the three circle thing. Yeah, so disassociation, repression, and denial. And he talks about
Can I show that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Here. That's so cool. Screenshot, y'all. No, you could probably like... Here you go. I don't want you to lose your place.
Oh, it's fine. Yeah, and even things like this, Michelle, you'll find interesting if you want to show everybody. If you look, the figuration of how that works.
Let me try to look at it. That's crazy. You can kind of see it. Sorry, you guys. The camera work. I mean, I like it. I think it looks good because there's a bunch of books all over.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. And it's a long book, and it's full of a lot of charts and a lot of things. So if you don't understand the dynamics of mental health as far as DID and PTSD, you're best to start out working. The idea is to work on yourself. And if you don't feel you're ready for that, then you just don't jump into it yet. You keep, doing other stuff. And even for some people ain't adamant readers, so they'd rather do something else like documentaries, but they do make, what do you call that? They actually have it where you can read a book, but you don't have to read it. It plays in your vehicle and it plays in your house.
Yeah, like a read aloud. They have Audible. That's literally what I do because I want to read all of these, but I have terrible reading comprehension.
Yeah.
So literally you can do a thing where your phone will scan it and it will read it aloud or a bunch of different stuff like that.
I didn't even know that.
You have like a compute, if you buy it on, or if you find it online, you can do the read aloud for that. If you're interested, in the car, in the shower.
That's neat. Actually, I'll be honest with you. I know my therapist loves doing the audiobooks in her car.
Yeah.
So, even therapists do it. So I recommend it highly.
On a walk.
Yeah, perfect. So I'll give you that one. And then I think we will get into... I'm trying to think where we left off. Oh, this one. We have to get into that one.
This is a great read on crucial topics that have been distorted by critics for too long. People deserve to know the truth, which Charles Whitfield describes clearly and convincingly. At last, someone has given thoughtful attention to the of traumatic amnesia and delayed recollection. Charles Whitfield answers the polemists of the false memory barrage with clinical truths and laboratory scholarship. This book is not an answering salvo in the escalating battle of competing dogmas. Rather, it is a successful effort to bring sense and balance in the emotionally charged, terribly important Remembering what happened in any traumatic experience is a basic and crucial to healing. For 100 years, the memory abuse of survivors has been questioned and challenged by all sorts of people, ranging from perpetrators to family members. More recently, this memory has been challenged by a combination of accused family members, their lawyers, and a few academics who claim the existence of a false memory syndrome. In the groundbreaking book, voted by his peers as being one of the best doctors in America, brings his clinical experience and knowledge about traumatic memory to examine, explore, and clarify the critical issues that threaten to invalidate the experience of survivors and trauma and handcuff the helping professionals who assist them to heal. This thorough, insightful book works to provide crucial information for anyone affected by traumatic experiences. That's so cool.
It's a thick one. And actually, since we got into the FMS stuff, if you want to, Michelle, hand me those one more. Yep, perfect.
Beautiful.
So that was something else because I've been through cult abuse myself, through old Roman Catholic cult abuse, I wanted to know more, let me hand you that one back, on the religious aspect of things. And I actually have read quite a few books, some Amish, some FLDS.
Amazing.
Child Bride, and again, Catholic. So I wanted to know more about it. And the reason I do reading on all this is each of my altars have a problem or a disability or a handicap based on their abuse, their past.
Right.
And I have 3 altars that were dealing with religious abuse issues. And so I decided, okay, I'm going to do some research. I'm going to figure out a way to help them to get better. So I started leaving these books around, and it was so funny because within a few days I'd start reading it, and then all of a sudden I'd look at my book and my bookmark would be moved. They were reading it.
That's amazing.
So it's like, I read it, but I don't remember reading it, so then I'd have to go back and read it again.
That's a question I had. Like, do you have to rewatch movies?
Yes, I have to rewatch movies. I have to reread books. And that's the thing with the books too. I have to have variation of age stuff for alters.
Right.
My therapist even has used therapeutic books for children in her office. So like I had a little alter 4 who's partially integrated, mostly integrated with me now. 6 is not yet.
Right.
And she will read parenting books on how a parent should be.
That's beautiful.
Putting a child to bed, tucking them in, giving them a goodnight kiss. These are things that, some of us have not gotten. So then she teaches them, your older alters can do this. She'll tell these littles, you talk to so-and-so and they'll help you do this. I'll teach them how to do this. So it's basically teaching your older alters to reparent your little alters instead of damaging them or traumatizing them or hiding them.
Right.
So it's like, that is a huge step in the healing process.
I mean, you don't just need to have DID for the reparenting.
That's a good question. That is something I guess I would have to look more into.
Sure.
I mean, I would see it working with like BPD.
I mean, we all have a child. I mean, if we,
No,
a
you're
lot of
correct.
us with trauma parts, we have a child part, not specifically an alter.
Yeah.
In a lot of cases.
And an example, you kind of seen that this weekend around my family.
Yeah.
My family has where they're really adult-like, and then they have moments where they act kind of childish. It's the same with any person, really. I mean, my therapist has even stated that she has an inner child. It's just
Very
how
common.
it is. Yeah, very common. And that's
different.
something I think people don't talk much about, as far as like the aspect of how little alters, they're missing something. They're missing a parental role. They're missing an adult figure.
Correct.
And if you get that support and that, help me out, Michelle.
Validation, parenting, empathy that you've never gotten before.
And I think that's where, again, that tool thing comes in, where I say a therapist is a tool. A therapist can be a little's parent in therapy to teach them, to help them.
Right.
The only time that it can be an issue is if a therapist will cross a boundary too much to where they want that little out all the time. And that can be a
Right.
boundary that's overstepped. And I will admit I've had past issues with some therapists that have stepped over that boundary. You know, hence searching for the right person
Correct.
to do the correct, you know, psychotherapy.
Amazing.
So religious book wise, I have 2 on the FDLS, or I always misinterpret that because I wasn't part of that. Yeah, FDLS.
Okay.
And one, they both talk about their escape from it. And I'm gonna let Michelle kind of get into that with you.
Amazing. Okay, Stolen Innocence. In September 2007, a packaged courtroom in St. George, Utah, sat hushed as Eliza Wall, the star witnessing the what is this word? Polygamous?
Polygamous.
I'm so sorry, y'all.
That's a hard word. It's a religious word.
Right. Polygamous sect leader Warren Jeffs gave captivating testimony on how Jeffs had forced her to marry her first cousin at age 14. This harrowing and vivid account provided to be the most compelling evidence against Jeffs, showing the harsh realities of the closed community and the lengths that Jeffs went to control the woman in it. Now, in this courageous memoir, Eliza Wall tells the incredible and inspirational story of how, in her time, the fundamental church of Latter-day Saints detailing how she emerged from its confines to help bring one of America's most notorious criminals to justice. I mean, people are saying it helps bring light to believers.
Well, and polygamy it's a basically an older order religion. They're actually changing it now where they're making it more logical, more safer. Polygamy is where you actually have more than one wife.
Right, okay.
So you have lots of children. You can have up to sometimes 14, 15 wives. The issue with polygamy is that as an adult, okay, there's some things that are fine that, you know, we have to leave go. But as far as children are concerned, you know, marrying a child off at 14, 15 years of age, some at 12.
Wow.
It's abuse.
Absolutely.
And these children have no idea what they're going through. And I found the books helpful because during even though I wasn't part of the FLDS, their stories, their dresses, their way of religion was very similar.
It can be relatable.
It was very relatable, yes. And then talking about how they escaped, how they got through it, how they had to cook, clean, be pure. I mean, I can remember some of my abuse going through that constantly. You know, behave yourself. You have to be clean. You have to be good. You have to be, you know, a child of God, all that. So, and that was the same with this one. This was an FDLS. I found her book even better. I loved her story. And she was the same FLDS, but she was also different because that was one group and this was another group that they had shut down. Yes. But it was still based on, what was his name? Walt, the guy on the back of the book. I think he's even still in prison today.
Oh my God. Yeah. I forget it's Jeffs.
Yeah, Jeffs. Warren Jeffs.
Right.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And as you can see, I don't know if you can see it, but their braids, their dress wear.
Right.
It's pretty similar to old Roman Catholics, so a lot of these religions kind of collide.
Right. So, potentially triggering for a lot of people.
Yes, it could be triggering, so if this is a problem, step aside. It's not an easy read.
This one says, Escape provides an astonishing look behind the lightly drawn curtains of the FLD's church, one of the most secretive religious groups in the United States. The story Carolyn Jessop tells is so weird and shocking that one hesitates to believe a sect like this, with 10,000 polygamous, I was going to say polyamorous.
It's a hard word.
Polygamous followers could really exist in the 21st century America, but Jessop's courageous, heart-wrenching account is absolutely factual. This riveting book reminds us that truth can indeed be much, much stranger than fiction.
Yeah.
Wow.
And people actually, they try to say it's not true, whatnot. But the thing is, Michelle, when you come from these cult-like abuses and you leave and you escape and you get better, you always take things with you. I find that fascinating. As many people as I've talked to, and in these books, they talk about how they keep some of their dresses, they keep some of their hairpins, they keep like their necklaces, their things that they've been abused with. And I find it fascinating as a DID system, a sufferer of dissociative identity disorder, that my cult abuse followed me.
Right.
And she can tell you, we went through all the boxes and things, little things that my alters had kept, right down to scapulas. And as you can see in that book, there was pictures and stuff too. People that usually have severe cult abuse for some reason feel the need to keep something to remind them
Right.
of what they've went through.
Wow.
So
As proof, as evidence that it even happened.
exactly. And sometimes you don't see much of that where people are kind of saying they are, but they don't have nothing with them. And that's sad because to me it's important to put that into the light, the limelight.
Sure.
Another thing I got into was child brides. And if you know of anybody that suffered from that issue, Cathy Glass does an amazing book called The Child Bride, and you find out how secretive these societies really are. I mean, they literally hush a teenage child, who I think this one was like in 15, 16, in Zena's story, and it takes Cathy Glass forever to figure out what's going on with her. And she thinks she's talking to her friends on her cell phone, and she's really not. She's talking to her husband, even though she's a child.
Right.
And she's trying to escape that issue, and they want to take her back and keep her there. And so, great story if you've been through that, if you want to know more about that.
This is amazing.
Yeah.
I knew from the start that Zena's story was going to be different. I also knew she was hiding something. It wasn't until she broke down sobbing that she was finally able to tell me what had happened to her and never forget it. Wow.
Yeah, and these are short books. Cathy Glass does amazingly, really well detailed little short books. So I really enjoy them. They really highlight my evenings. I find reading at night my way to fall asleep, even though once in a while the book will tap me in the head, but
It's amazing, though.
It's like an EMDR effect that it's actually helped me to get off nighttime meds because I don't want to be on them. So reading will have that effect to slow me down, shut me down. And
That's amazing.
although I warn you, there's a book danger,
Right.
Another one I found interesting, I've only read one Amish book, but I found it interesting. The Amish and Mennonite community do
Wow.
deal with this issue as well, which people don't talk about.
Right.
And Misty's story here, where she talks about the SA abuse and the brutal betrayal and the ultimate survival she goes through, it's just an amazing book. I couldn't put it down, I'll be honest with you. And the reason I relate is the dress wear again. I don't really relate with the head caps
Sure.
so much. Well, I guess I kind of wear them.
Mm-hmm.
My religion was more based on keep your hair covered, so we didn't have to wear like specific, but we also were told not to cut our hair, which is something else the Amish and Mennonite community feel heavily into. So I will let you read a little bit about that one.
Amazing. At age 6, Misty Griffin's parents began dressing the family as Amish, living a life seeming piety to the outside world while maintaining an abusive and torturous household. After years of keeping Misty and her younger sister apart from society on a far-off mountain ranch, the girls were handed off to live in a real Amish community. What initially seemed like a reprieve, an idyllic and quiet country life amongst peaceful people, launched Misty into new depths of the hands of another sexual predator, a church elder. Tears of the Silenced is a true story of an isolated child and abusive girlhood. In this new edition, Misty Griffin recounts the details of a life of physical, emotional, and sexual abuse in her redemptive and re-entry into a modern society. It is a story that ultimately is about the triumph of the human spirit as Misty transforms from a victim to a victim's advocate and successful author. all with a 3rd grade education. Wow.
It says very good book. And
Educational.
yeah, exactly. Oh, there went. I was gonna say it went up for a second. Um, and so I think this will be this is our last one on the cult thing.
Okay.
I know everybody's waiting tremendously to get into the DID literature, but I'm kind of standing back because I want you all to understand that you know these are things that you have to start out with, because we do have people that are newer in this that need to start out. So we want to give them something to begin with before we get into the DID heavy stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
One last religious one was Childhood Interrupted, and it was growing up under the cruel regime of the Sisters of Mercy. I really related with this book because I dealt with a nun called Sister Mary.
Yeah.
And her cult abuse was so severe, and I'm still at this very time processing through that and trying to deal with that. And this book was very helpful, and it's done by Kathleen O'Malley. And basically they talk about the issues that they've had, and you know, I even have some pages where I got this little tiny mark where I'm marking things because I'm like, I can relate. And that's the thing with these books, guys. If you want to take them in and mark them, take them into therapy.
Yeah.
And then give them to your therapist and say, hey, I marked spots that I've read. Can you please read this? Because it gives your therapist an understanding of what you can relate to when you can't speak. And sometimes with DID, you cannot speak about your trauma.
Oh my
so
God.
if you can find a piece in a book to take in and say, read this, it will give your therapist a whole new perspective on what's going on up in here.
Oh my God, that'll be amazing.
Yeah.
An extraordinary memoir about the loss of childhood. In 1950, Kathleen O'Malley and her 2 sisters were legally abducted from their mother after 8-year-old Kathleen was raped. They were committed to an industrial school run by Sisters of Mercy Order of Nuns, who gave the notorious Magdalene homes. Kathleen and her sisters were subjected to hard labor, floggings, near starvation, and humiliation until they were permitted to leave when they reached the age of 16. Childhood Interrupted is a deeply moving and inspirational story of a young girl's resilience in the face of trauma. People say it's a powerful must-read memoir, searingly honest.
It was very good. Very, very good.
Amazing.
So what do we got for questions? Do we have any questions or anything anybody's
Well, people
asking?
are talking about how if you don't like reading books, you can check out your Amazon Kindle or do
hi, Troops.
Amazon.
Thank you for adding that. That's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Or also you could do Amazon audiobooks. And also I was asking you about how if your alters, like, do you watch, if you go to the movies and you switch, will you have not seen that movie?
I'll be honest with you, I don't go to the movies.
Right. I know, that was very ableist of me.
No. And some people can do that. My issue is I leave home. If I'm not in my environment, I do switch more. I have a lot of issues with that.
Right.
At home, like we're sitting here, I'm very more comfortable,
Right.
and I'm very comfortable with Michelle. So it's like I'm able to talk about this stuff and go through this stuff, and watching a movie at home, I can usually get about, well, how do I put this? Sometimes I can get through almost a whole movie. Sometimes I don't. And if I don't, I just kind of flub it off. I'm like, oh, okay, I'll just watch it again, you know? It's like, and it'll happen, you know, in the beginning of working with my DID, I'd have to do it 3 or 4 or 5 times before I'd get through what I want. I think the hardest part, though, is I'm very heavily wanting to understand this disorder to the point where I obsess over it because I want it gone. So I want to watch a documentary or a movie based on DID, and sometimes the display of it is immoral, which can cause me to trigger. So I'll be watching, I'll be like, that's not right. No. And then all of a sudden I get upset, and then I'll switch and I'm gone. And then I got to go back and go, okay, I can do this. This is not, this is just a movie. It's not happening to me. So then I will go back and try to watch it again.
Amazing.
So, Another issue that a lot of people don't talk about in DID is some of the side effects of it. Side effects, symptoms, I might as well say. And one of them is self-harm.
Right.
A lot of people that have DID deal with self-harm issues. And I wanted to read on that, and I wanted to do more on that. But again, I'm going to point out, Cathy Glass does books on the self-harm issue with teenagers.
Sure.
And the reason I started reading these again is because I have teen alters
Right.
that were harming the body. And
Yeah.
I've dealt with it since, I want to say it started when I was probably 14 years old, 15 years old in there. The alter knows more than I do. And so it was like, okay, how do I show her that there is a better way to deal with this?
Mm-hmm.
And my therapist's point of view was to reparent them.
Yeah.
So, and then I thought, well, I can help reparent them. And I started getting these two books again, you know, to deal with that issue.
Amazing.
And I've also found keeping them busy. If you have teen alters, try to have your therapist help them find a new role. You know, the self-harming, the reason they do it is they're trying to, and believe it or not, I was shocked when my therapist told me this. I was angry. I said, I hate these alters. I want them gone. I hate them. I wish they would die at that point. She's like, it doesn't work that way. You die, they die, same thing. She's like, you have to work with them and get to know them and understand them. So when we started that process, it was very, very difficult for me to connect with them.
Yeah.
There was a huge amnesic barrier.
I'm sure.
It was a lot. I'll put it that way. But to get them to understand that harming me is not going to fix our memory.
Okay.
You know, so
Yeah.
they would see the cult abuse and then they would harm me to stop it. They didn't want me to see that. But now it's
Wow.
more like my therapist said, no, if you show Eva what you've been through, you can heal from it. And then she started giving them jobs and things like that. And these books were a big help with that too.
Wow.
Because Cathy Glass, rooster. I have a chicken outside. Anyway, she talks about how she does that, the reparenting
Yeah.
role. So I will let you dig into that.
That's amazing. Let's check it out. Damaged. A deeply moving story on how one foster carrier's profound patience and love unlocked a little girl's darkest, most painful secrets.
Yeah, and it's a child doing this. Isn't that? I feel so horrible about that. But the way she deals with it is amazing. Amazing.
Cathy Glass has fostered 50 children over 20 years, but none of them have been as disturbed as Jody, a troubled 8-year-old whose violence and aggression had seen off 5 foster carriers in just 4 months. When Jody arrived, Cathy had no idea what lay beneath Jody's shocking behavior, which included smearing feces all over the house, erupting into violent rages, and even cutting herself. Little by little, Jody's rage was met with patience and understanding. She began to trust Cathy and to confide in dreadful background, which had led her to present torment. Jody's childhood had been in an appalling litany of mistreatment and neglect, which should have alerted the numerous social worker professionals involved with her case. Jody's case file was so big it filled 2 suitcases, but apparently not one of her social workers had ever read the entire file. If they had, Jody's story and her future might have been very different. Finally, in Cathy, Jody found one adult worthy of her trust, one who could help her begin the process of recovery. That's amazing. That kind of gave me like the chills.
Yeah, I recommend her books for healing your inner child. She does amazing work. That, and I also read Casey Watson and Rosie Lewis, who do similar books in series with real foster children. So,
Wow.
you're at 17%. I don't know if you need to know that.
Yeah, that's fine. This one isn't
Okay.
as important, but thank you.
Yeah. Another one I want to talk about, which I have integration with, is Alter 12. And Alter 12, it was actually a disabled alter. When in therapy, she cannot see, she cannot move, and so we had to deal with that.
Just
And so she had like a mutism, and that was the hard part about that. Her mutism was probably caused because of all the abuse, being told to be quiet, don't say anything, not to be seen. And so I was like, okay, I need to do some research on mutism, on disabilities of an alter. So I started reading Torey Hayden, and she's actually a therapist, which I didn't realize it till when I got done with the book. I'm like, oh my god, she's a therapist.
Yeah,
So
that's
she talks,
amazing.
and she talks about mutism
Yeah, that's
quite a
big
bit
one.
in this one.
Amazing. Ghost Girl. A testament of the powers of caring and commitment. JD never spoke. She never laughed or cried or uttered any sound. Despite efforts to reach her, JD remained locked in her own troubled world until one remarkable teacher persuaded her to break her self-imposed silence. Nothing in all of Torey Hayden's experience could have prepared her for the shock of what JD told her, a story too horrendous for Torey's professional colleagues to acknowledge. Yet a little girl is living in a nightmare, and Torey responded in a way the only way that she knew how, with courage, compassion, and dedication, demonstrating once again the tremendous power of love and resilience in the human spirit. This person says the world needs to be more like Torey Hayden, Boston Globe. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's a good book. And it's the same with, I'm going to give you another one, Casey Watson. Casey Watson, The Girl Without a Voice. And she also talks about mutism and dealing with children. And these are steps that'll help you in your DID journey, because if you have a disabled alter or an alter that can't connect with the present time period, you want to find a way to get to them. So if they can't see you, they can't hear you, they can't move, a therapist has to make a step to figure out how to get to them, to help them.
Exactly.
So
okay. I thought she began, but she couldn't quite catch the rest because the kettle was coming to a boil. She flipped the switch up. Sorry, love. I thought she might, she whispered again, but as soon as I began to approach her, it was as if a shutter had come down. The change was so abrupt and decisive, she'd mentally run from me to a far corner of her mind. When, I'm sorry if I mispronounced this, Imogen was a young girl with a select mutism, joins the school. Her teacher, Casey Watson, is determined to discover the truth behind her silence, revealing a shocking and devastating past. Okay.
yeah, that's a tough one. How are we on time, Michelle? Are we doing good?
We've been live for an hour and 27 minutes, and my battery's good, so we're fine.
Well, now we're getting into the DID stuff.
All right.
Yay! Which is probably what everybody's been kind of waiting for.
About time!
Yay! Well, the steps come first.
No, I'm kidding. I'm more than happy to talk about all of these books.
Okay, so first off, we're going to do just stories. So basically, stories that people have written but with their DID. Because in the beginning of learning, you want to just kind of see other people's perspectives of DID. And I wish there was more research. I really do. That is up to date and more fluent. And it's difficult to find that kind of content.
Yeah.
But I kind of stuck with the originals.
Amazing.
So this one here is done by Richard, and I don't know if it's Baer or Beer. And it's a doctor's harrowing story of treating a woman with 17 personalities.
Wow.
Yeah, it's called Switching Time. And I'm going to let Michelle read that. And I think there's this inner part here. And it's from a therapist's point of view, which I thought was really cool.
That is very cool. One afternoon in 1989, Karen Overhill walks into a psychiatrist Richard Baer's office complaining of vague physical symptoms and depression. Odder still, she reveals that she's suffering from a persistent memory problem. Routinely, she loses parts of her day, finding herself in places she doesn't remember going to or being told about conversations she doesn't remember having. Her problems are so pervasive that she often feels like an impersonator of her own life. She doesn't recognize the people who call themselves her friend, and she can't even remember being intimate with her own husband. Baer recognizes that Karen is on the verge of suicide, and while variations of medications do keep her alive, tries to discover the root cause of her strange complaints. It's the work of months, then years, to gain Karen's trust and learn the true extent of the trauma behind her past. What she eventually reveals is nearly beyond belief. A narrative of a childhood spent grappling with unimaginable horror. How has Karen survived with even tenuous scraps on sanity? Then Baer receives an envelope in the mail. It's marked with Karen's return address, but contains a letter from a little girl who writes that she's 7 years old and lives inside of Karen. Soon, Baer receives letters from others claiming to be parts of Karen. Under hypnosis, these alternate Karen personalities reveal themselves in shocking variety with undeniable traits, both physical and psychological. One alter is a young boy filled with frightening aggression. Another is an adult male who considers himself Karen's protector. A third, sassy flirt who emerges when Karen has sex. I don't know where, maybe it goes on over here. But by compartmentalizing her pain, guilt, and fear in this fashion, by switching time with alternative selves, the situation warrants that Karen has been able to function since childhood. Realizing that his patient represents an extreme case of multiple personality disorder, Baer faces the daunting task of creating a therapy that will make Karen whole again. Somehow, in fact, he must gain the trust of each of Karen's 17 alters and convince them of the necessity of their own inhabilitation. In the first account of such therapy to be told from the perspective of healing physician, a stunningly devoted healer who worked selflessly for decades, so that Karen could one day live as a single human being. That's amazing.
It's a long one.
From the therapist perspective?
Yep.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, it's like he wrote her story so you can understand it. And I can relate to the husband thing. I mean, being married and having DID is a very complicated a thing.
Absolutely.
Excuse me. Another one that most people don't know about is Trudy Chase. And Trudy Chase, you can find her story quite a few places. Oprah has done a documentary on it.
Okay.
And her story is horrific, Michelle. Horrific. And there's even a movie, and I do believe it's the Several Lives of Trudy Chase, it's called. And the movie actually follows the book pretty well. There's less detail in the movie than there is in the book, but the book I recommend. It's a very good book. It's very open, very honest about her life. And you got to remember back then things were a bit different. So she had to figure out ways to work with her environment to survive her alters issues.
Right.
And so I'll let you read the back of that one, and then we'll get to the next one.
Amazing. Black Catherine is the willing guardian of the children. Sewer mouth voices rage in a torrent of 4-letter words. 12 is the sensitive artistic child. Rabbit doesn't speak but howls in pain. There are some of the personalities that live within Trudy Chase. For her entire life, they have protected her from the memories of unspeakable acts of child abuse and incest that she endured for years. To escape the horror of the violent abuse, the 2-year-old child went to sleep and created an inner world of the troops. The 92 voices that shielded her from the pain, but she never fully knew existed as she established her career, got married, and started a family. Only now has Trudy Chase unlocked the door of the terrifying crimes of the past. Like Sybil, this is a spellbinding journey through the fragmented world of multiple personality. But unlike anything you've ever read, this unique book has over 90 authors. For all of Trudy Chase's troops speaking out to tell her story. All but one when Rabbit howls.
Yeah, and she's actually a system that chose to not integrate. Wow. She wanted to have that partial awareness and keep her alters. Because of the severe abuse she went through, she found it's safer to keep them. Mm-hmm. And even in what you just read in the back of her book there, it states, non-human alters, they do exist. However, they like they had stated, she has a one that depicts a rabbit where it's just it howls out, it wants help. So animal alters have this ability to protect, but they also have an inability to have issues with functionality in society. So, and there's quite a little bit of research on that. I really wish therapists and psychologists would do a book on non-human alters, to talk about how they are, how they aren't, all that. So
amazing. Absolutely.
Another one I want to bring into light, and everybody knows about it, and that's Sybil. And shockingly enough, I did not read this book right away. I actually waited 6 years of being in DID therapy, intense therapy, before I decided I didn't like it. I actually denied my DID for 5 years. I didn't want to get into it. I hated it.
Right.
And when I read Sybil, I found conflict. I really did. It seemed, how do I put this? A little bit of cosplay. But then you think about it, back then, they didn't really know how to talk about it or display it. So, of course, they're going to tear it apart. Of course, they're going to play with it. And when I read Sybil, it was difficult to connect with because they would put in pieces that made sense, but then they would put in pieces that didn't make sense. And it was kind of upsetting. Yeah. But then you get to looking into her story, and they show like her artwork and stuff. And that's the cool thing. There are analysts out there, which I've had my artwork analyzed, to where you can see variations of style, color with alters. Alters express themselves in art.
Wow.
And they will use various forms to show their emotions, to show how they're dealing with things. And Sybil does that. And they talk about that a lot in this book, how her artwork changes in variation and form.
Amazing.
So I'll let you have that.
More amazing than any work of fiction, yet true in every word, it swept from the top of the bestsellers list and riveting the consciousness of the world. As an Emmy Award-winning film starring Sally Field, the captive read of the home screens of an entire nation has endured the most electrifying TV movie ever made. Its story of a survivor of a terrifying childhood abuse, victim of sudden and mystifying blackouts, and the first case of multiple personality ever psychoanalyzed. You're about to meet Sybil and the 16 selves whom she played host, both women and men, each with different personalities, speech patterns, and even personal appearance. You'll experience the strangeness and fascination of one woman's rare affliction and travel with her on her long, ultimately triumphant journey back to the wholeness. People say astonishing. It forces you to look at yourself and the people around you in a new way. A moving human narrative from New York Reviews of Books.
Yeah. And the thing is, excuse me, the book was, with Sybil, it's very conflicted. It's caused a lot of arguments. I would even say Sybil was maybe the reason they changed MPD to DID.
Part of it.
Because we went through this phase, everybody wanted it. Wow. And the people that had it didn't want it. And then pretty soon you had psychologists and doctors saying it's not real because everybody wanted to play this. And it's kind of similar to what's going on today. As a person of facts and perspective, me, Michelle, I like to depict things apart. Mm-hmm. And at the time I had DID, I was told I had DID. I thought to myself, I'm going to find everything I can to say I don't.
Right. Oh my
so
God.
I actually did. I bought the book Sybil Exposed by Debbie Nathan.
Wow.
And I wanted to okay, if I can read this and believe what's in this, I can tear myself apart and I could say, hey, read this. I want my therapist to read this and say, I don't have this.
Right.
And
oh my God.
It was I was so angry when I finished the book, Michelle, because I was like, everything in here is so false.
Oh my God, that's frustrating.
And I'm just like, I have it. What am I going to do with it? I was hoping it would give me the knowledge and something to say I don't have it. So this is actually, and that's why I kept this book, because it was my start of, nope, you're going to deal with this kind of thing.
Yeah.
So if you are a newer person dealing with DID, it helped me. I don't know if it helped you, but I actually wanted to declassify myself. We'll put it that way.
Fair. Yeah.
And in a way, it gave me more research. It gave me a reason to want to read more and learn more. So,
Wow.
so I will give you that one.
Amazing. Sybil, a name that resonates with legions of obsessed fans who followed the nonfiction blockbuster from 1973, the book rocketed multiple personality disorder into public consciousness and played a major role in having the diagnostic added to the psychiatric Bible, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. But what do we really know about how Sybil came to be? In her news-breaking book, Sybil Exposed, journalist Debbie Nathan gives proof that the allegedly true story outlined in the mega bestseller that was largely fabricated. The actual identity of Sybil Shirley Mason has been available for some years, as the idea of the book might have been exaggerated, but Nathan reveals the trio of women behind the legend: the willing patient, her ambitious shrink, and the imaginative journalist who spun their story into bestseller gold. Sybil Exposed draws from an enormous trail of papers, records, photos, and tapes that unearth lives and passions from these three women whose stories exploded into epic movements with consequences beyond their wildest dreams. Set across the 20th century and rooted in a time when few professional roles were available to women, this story of coercive sexism, bold but unchecked ambition, runaway, greedy, utter human vulnerability, duplicity and shared delusion, shaky theories, and psychoanalysis exuberantly and drastically practiced, how one modest young woman's life turned psychiatry on its head and radically changed the course of therapy and our culture as well. Wow.
Yeah.
Controversy.
I mean, that's the thing with the lady that wrote this book. I had a lot of confusion with it, because here's a woman who is saying she knew Sybil.
Yeah.
And here she is depicting her apart, but she's not licensed.
Wow.
She's not a therapist. She doesn't have the knowledge. What? She's just basically tearing this poor woman's life apart, who's already been traumatized,
Absolutely.
who's been through enough. And that's why I loved Colin Ross when he had took this on and it's like, okay, this is enough. And he exposed a lot of the issues that Sybil had that related to DID. She had an eating disorder. She had harming issues.
Yeah.
She, and you got to think about back then, they didn't have the things that they have today.
Yeah, that's true.
So her therapist did give her medication, and some heavy duty medication, because she didn't know how to help her. And today there's more options than that. So it's good to know the history of somebody who had the disorder, but like today she's being depicted apart.
Yeah,
it's sad. It really is.
Yeah.
So do we have any questions or anything? Figure we might as well check real quick.
Well, yeah, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to let us know.
Yeah, please feel free to ask, because I love questions.
Yeah.
So, okay, well, we'll move to the next one. And again, I'm just going through books that you can read first before I get into the psychology stuff. Another person I got into and I wanted to learn about because of the artwork was Kim Noble.
Yeah.
And Kim Noble, I liked some of her work, but then I was like,
Sure.
The hardest part about her story was that she really doesn't have much awareness to her past. So her artwork is beautiful and obviously changed by different altercations and stuff. And,
Wow.
I found the book useful. I found some of her documentary useful. And she's a very kind of private in life, which I don't blame her. sometimes it's difficult for older women based on the baby boomer phase age
Right.
to want to come out, because back then people that had DID were considered crazy. They were considered weird. They wanted to lock them up. So I can kind of understand her stance. But again, I found the book useful. I found some things interesting in it. Especially the artwork. I love her artwork. She does amazing work for that.
Wow.
But I also, like I said, I think that's the issue that's going on in today's society, is that just because an older system has DID or a younger system has DID doesn't give them a more, how do I put it, more of a higher stance than another.
Absolutely.
And I'll repeat again, I have a scenario on this. I don't look at the president, I look at the president of the United States the same as I do his janitor that cleans his toilet, because they're still humans. They're both still the same.
Absolutely.
So I kind of try to put that depiction on how I view that. So anyway, here's Kim Noble's.
Amazing. Let's check this out. Imagine life spent trying to discern where you are, how you got there, who you're with, and what happened. You lose large chunks of time abruptly. You find yourself wearing another person's clothes, sitting in the driver's seat of a car you don't remember driving, or cleaning up a meal you can't recall eating. For Kim Noble, re-owned artist whose mother whose body plays host to over 20 distinct personalities, this life is normal. After many years in and out of mental institutions and various diagnoses that she knew instinctively to be wrong, in the 1995 Noble was finally diagnosed with dissociative identity disorder, or DID, a condition typically prompted by severe abuse during childhood. DID is thought to be a creative way for some minds to splinter in order to cope with unbearable pain. Alternatively, taking possession of Noble's body are, among others, a scared little boy who speaks only Latin, and selective mute, a gay man, and an anorexic teenager. Then there is Patricia, a stable and loving new dominant alter who was able to win back custody of Noble's daughter, Amy. All of me traces Noble's tumultuous and fragmented life of the childhood onward, providing insights into the interactions between memory, mental illness, and creativity. It turns shocking, inspiring, sometimes funny, and deeply moving. Kim Noble has an intentionally renowned artist who lives in Surrey, England. Sorry, anyone who lives in there, with her daughter. This is so cool. Wow.
Well, excuse me, I have a bit of a cough. The thing I did like about her story, though, is that her daughter is so involved in her life.
Yeah.
And I choked on my own water.
That's okay.
The thing that I really enjoyed about her story is how involved and how close and how personal her child is, because mine is the same way, so there's that aspect, that there's some systems that don't have children and there's some systems that do, so we got to be open to that, and have an understanding of that.
Yeah, that's amazing. Recommend. I'm just showing some of these pictures.
Yeah, her artwork is so unique.
And these are like different alters doing the artwork?
Yes.
Amazing. Okay. Do we have anything else?
This one I found very useful. It's called The Flock. And it's an autobiography of multiple personality by Joan Frances Casey with Lynn Wilson. And I really, really love this book, but there are boundaries that are crossed in this book, to where, like, the patient actually kind of lives with the therapist. But here's the thing, in the end, it healed her.
Wow.
So it's like, okay, maybe it is a boundary that's crossed. Yeah, it's not appropriate. But there are things that I learned from the book that I found really interesting. It does have a sad ending. I'm not going to give the ending away.
Okay.
But I really liked their work and how she involved, I do believe it was her husband she involved in helping her understand each altar, how to work with them and whatnot. So I found this book pretty useful.
Amazing.
Like I said, talk to your therapist about it first to make sure that it goes with what you're learning.
A remarkable book, totally honest and compelling, a ground zero look at one of the most frightening outcomes of child abuse. This is the real thing. When, as 26-year-old married graduate student Joan Frances Casey awoke on the legend of building ready to jump, on the ledge of a building ready to jump, she did not know how she got there, and it wasn't the first time she blanked out. This time, she thought she would give therapy another try. After a few sessions, Lynn Wilson, an experienced psychiatric social worker, was shocked to discover that Joan had MPD, multiple personality disorder. As she came to know Joan's distinct selves, Lynn uncovered a nightmarish pattern of emotional and physical abuse, including rape and incest, that nearly succeeded in smothering the artist and intellectual gifts of an amazing young woman. In an extraordinary move that challenged the medical establishment, many of whom believe MPD does not exist, Lynn embarked on a radical program of reparenting therapy to bring out and individually treat Joan's 24 separate personality. Missy, a 5-year-old artist, Joe, the scholar, Rusty, the motherless boy, Renee, the people pleaser, Josie, the self-destructive toddler, Joan Frances, the perfect one, and the other deeply scarred members of the flock that had been helping Joan Frances Casey function, despite tremendous physical pain since she was a child. Written by the woman who lived it and the therapist who helped her to become whole, The Flock is an intense and enlightening view inside a fractured mind of multiple personalities. This is a coherent autobiographical study of its kind, and it is absolutely memorizing, simply not to be missed, from the Detroit News.
Yeah, it's a good one.
That's amazing.
It is. I love that one. And I would recommend, that would be a pretty good one for somewhat of a beginner. I mean, it doesn't have a lot of logic behind it and stuff that would make it difficult. And excuse me.
No worries.
2 other books that I recommend is Moon Shadows by Colin Ross, which I just did a video on.
Hey.
And this one has multiple stories in it. So basically what he did is he took his patients, changed their names, and he added in, I don't remember how many of them. There was quite a few of them in here, where he put their stories, their artwork, he had artwork done, and he talks about them, basically putting their story in, each one of them, and what they've been through and how they deal with it.
Wow.
So I will let you read the back of that one. Yep.
Moon Shadows contains stories of recovery from childhood abuse, neglect, family violence, and psychological trauma. Each contributor tells her story in a different way, from a different perspective. Moon Shadows shows that real recovery is possible even from extreme trauma. Wow.
Yeah, and
I gotta look
the
at
nice
this.
thing about that book is it's not real harsh. It's mostly just kind of giving you an idea of what each person has been through, how they healed. And the cool thing about their stories in there is some of them talk about healing, some of them, well, all of them talk about healing, but some of them talk about how they healed, and it's all different.
Absolutely.
Yet they're seeing the same doctor. That's what's cool about it. So, when Colin Ross says everybody's trauma is different, everybody's a different system, everybody heals differently, and every therapy setting is based on that person's lifestyle, abuse, all that, and they form their therapy around that.
Wow.
And that's important. It's so important.
That's amazing.
And last we have Dissociative Identity, and this is just for reading mostly. But she's got the thing about her book, it's very short, but it's very good. And it's called Dissociative Identity Disorder in a Nutshell, a First-Hand Account, and it's by Shirley J. Davis. And you can find her on YouTube. And she does weekly talks about her integration process, her DID, and she does an amazing job. Okay. And I actually am very honored to see her stories every week.
Yeah.
She's older. I respect her for
Amazing.
that. But her book, it's like a little guide, Michelle. It talks about the simplest of things, but
It's little.
it is very little, but it's so good.
Wow. So this is a quick read for anyone who doesn't like reading.
Yeah, it's a quick read for anyone who doesn't like reading. And I'm going to let you dig through this a little bit. But she talks about, therapy, stages of recovery, and it's all compact.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Shirley J. Davis has written a compelling book describing dissociative identity disorder from the first-hand experience. There has been no effort to sensationalize this once thought rare condition. Instead, Davis uses the latest scientific information available on the internet and her own experiences within 27 years of therapy to explain to anyone who is interested in the ins and outs of the recovery from this disorder. Amazing. Making the decision to live. Wow.
Yeah.
That's so
She's
cool.
got so many little things in there that I was like, wow, I need to promote this book because it's really well done,
The effects of stress on the brain and DID.
Yeah.
Wow.
And the fact that she does YouTube too to talk about these everyday things, and she does it with no cosplay, no nothing. I just adore that. I love her honesty. I love her talks. I mean, they're not very long, but they're very interesting. So, check her out on YouTube. She's called Dissociative Identity Disorder in a Nutshell.
Amazing.
Give her a follow and read her book, especially if you're starting out, because
Oh my god, yeah.
yeah, she gives, and the fact that she's integrated is my goal. So it's like everything she says is very important to me because I'm like, okay, I want to get to that point.
I mean, I heard that functional multiplicity and integration can be extremely similar therapy techniques.
It is. It's just that the slight difference is that your alters stay kind of separated from you, but you have awareness to what you're doing. So I want to say my therapist calls it partial awareness. So I want to
Sure.
say it's similar to that, to where you're aware of what your alters are doing. You don't have that amnesic block, and yet they still kind of stay separated to protect you.
Okay.
Integration, and again, I'm not a therapist. I could be saying this a little bit wrong or something,
Fair.
but I'm trying to explain it in my perspective as best as I can. And integration for me, I have a long way to go yet.
Right.
I've only had I have 10 alters, and I got 5 that are integrated and 5 that are not. And I will tell you, Michelle, the first time for integration scared me to death, but I felt so much relief when
Really?
the first time it happened. Yes.
Do you miss your alters at all?
The 5 that are integrated, no.
Sure.
I don't miss them because they're me.
here.
Yeah, and the weird thing is it's weird because like the smaller alters, it's strange because I I feel this need to do fun things like they did. So it's like I'll be going up. I have a room above me for my little altars, and I'll be going up there to clean up, and I feel this need to just play with them a little bit.
Really?
Yeah, and it's like, is that part of 4? Is that
Yeah.
why I'm doing that? And it's the same with some of the older altars that I've integrated with. It's like one of them being a male. I have the full awareness that I feel like I want to have a more of a male stance
Really?
conversation with my husband.
Okay.
So we'll get to talking about hunting, fishing. Well, and you've got that experience this weekend, Michelle.
I mean, I've never met Wilbur, so I
No.
wouldn't have known.
But he, that's the thing. Wilbur is part of me now. So
Yes,
some
so
of
I
the
have met
aspects
Wilbur.
of what you've done this weekend, you've learned some
Absolutely.
of what he's done, which will be presented in the future.
Yeah.
So, I guess that's how I can best answer. It's a hard question because each integration could be different too. I don't know.
True. It's very.
Which is
can't
why I
even
haven't
imagine.
kind of got into the talking about it on
It's
my own
bizarre.
channel. It is. I think the biggest, hardest thing I think I want to tell you all is if you get to this point you want to integrate, make sure your head is clear, And I think the hardest part for me is when an alter shows you those memories you need to see. And it almost feels like death. I'm not going to lie to you.
Oh my God.
It's like your heart rate goes up, you're sweating, you're shaking,
Jeez.
and you will feel somatic symptoms. Like some of the abuse I've been through, I will feel it wherever that abuse happened in my body. And I'll be honest with you, I think it even kind of freaks my therapist out because she's worried about my health because I have health issues.
Right.
Caused by having this DID for so long. And once integration starts coming, you learn to just kind of take it and let it happen, view it. And then once you start to view it and you have that emotional release with it, it's like heaven. I'm not going to lie to you, it's like heaven. It's like a huge cry that you needed to have.
Absolutely. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Do you want to check out any books?
Yes. I think one of them that we should probably get into, and again, this is the psychology aspect of it, so I wouldn't recommend this for anybody that's like 2 or 3 years in. I'm saying more years in. And especially if it's ask your therapist if it's okay to read these books or not, because you don't want to cross that line. But the trauma model theory, a solution to the problem of, and that's a tough word for me, comorbidity in psychiatry. Colin Ross. Some people don't care for him. That's fine. Everybody's entitled to their own doctor, their own opinion.
Absolutely.
I just happen to like his work for me. And he actually talks about agoraphobia in genes, and he talks about assessment process based on hypothesis, disassociation, and repression. And if you have any questions or you have something you want to know about the book that I'm currently on, please let me know, and Michelle here will be more than happy to read a section for you.
Yes, please.
Trauma responses, physical damages, and chronic childhood trauma. He gets into DID, the criteria of factitious DID. So he actually talks about how...
That's amazing.
Yeah, he actually talks about how there is a where you factitiously display it. Eating disorders.
Oh, wow. Sleep disorders.
Yep, sleep disorders. And impulse. Trauma model and therapist importance, getting rid of DID. So he actually talks about how to do the process of getting rid of it in this book. And so when I had gotten this book, I had to make sure my therapist was okay with it. And then she actually was, at the time, she went through a lot of this too, where because I mark everything, again, I repeat, when you mark things, you take it into your therapist and she can read it and then she can use it towards her own method of helping you.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh.
This is a really cool part. It's called a victim rescuer perpetrator triangle. So if you can see that, it's pretty cool. He's got quite a few little things in here. Reenactment on trauma. So reenactment is where you actually reenact the abuse on yourself.
Sure.
As sick as that sounds and as horrible as it sounds, it really does happen because, how do I put this? Alters find if they can get through, because it's going to happen to them anyway. So as a child, if you're abused and you want to get through it, you know that just get it done and over with feeling. That's why alters will reenact abuse. They figure if they get it done and over with, it'll go away.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, so that feeling you're feeling in your body, that alter can feel it too. And then they go, I'm going to take over. I'm going to get rid of this. So they'll re-traumatize you.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That makes complete sense.
Yeah. Dealing with new alters. He has a whole section on that.
Amazing.
Yeah. So I'll give you that.
Colin A. Ross received his MD from the University of Alberta in 1981 and completed his specialty training in the psychiatry at University of Manitoba in 1985. He is the author of over 100 papers in professional journals. most of them dealing with psychological trauma and its long-term consequences. He is the past president of the International Science for the Study of Dissociation. In the trauma model, Dr. Ross provides a detailed, scientifically testable model of mental illness. He defines the problem of comorbidity as a central conceptual problem in psychiatry at the beginning of the 21st century, then solves it using the logic and predictions of the trauma model. A person with extensive comorbidity suffers from many different psychiatric disorders, at the same time including depression, substance abuse, anxiety, and eating disorders, psychotic symptoms, and personality disorders. Some individuals require inpatient and psychiatric treatment to fit the clinical profile of the trauma model. Dr. Ross also provides a detailed description of trauma therapy, which is suitable for a wide range of addictions, self-destructive behaviors, and symptoms. General principles and specific techniques are described and illustrated with dialogue and composite case examples. Hey, it's young Colin Ross.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's so neat. It's an older book, and the thing is, he's older now. You think he would retire, but he loves doing the work.
This is amazing.
He still does the work, and he loves it. And
I've never seen him this young.
I know. Well, and that's the thing that you get. What I like about it is now he's doing more lives and doing more stuff and working with other therapists and everything, and so it's helpful. And he's open to even like interviews. So I'm hoping somewhere down the line, Michelle, if you get brave enough, give him a call, see if he'll do an interview.
Dr. Colin Ross.
Yes, big promoter of his work. And again, some people don't like his work, but there's Caroline Spring, there's Melissa Kaufman. There are so many really good therapists out there that want to help and do the work. So
sure. Amazing.
But and I see you have troops here. We have teen alters that also do that. Oh, I can relate, troops. Thank you.
That's
I'm gonna let you get back to reading those because you're better at it than I am.
I actually went to Dr. Ross's inpatient and trauma for DID unit in Michigan. Our first therapy session, I have to admit, I was a fan growing over him because I like him so much. Fangirling. Oh, that's so funny. Fangirling, not fangirling. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's a very renowned specialist.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, some people say he's kind of stern and it's hard to work with him.
Sure.
And again,
I'd love to know your experience.
Yeah, well, and that's just it. Yeah, me too. And so, the thing is with him is he may be stern, but he's stern because he wants you to get better.
Yeah.
He wants you to heal. He wants you to get through that chaotic phase. And I think for me personally, that's why I like his driven aspect of it.
Absolutely.
So now you all know about Deborah Bray Haddock, and this is a pretty popular book right now. Considering it's a little older, but people love this book and they find it very useful. And I found it's called a source book, a DID source book. It states it in the front. And it talks about developmental issues and how it works.
Amazing.
Silence or secrets, which seems to be a big thing with alters. Alters like to keep
Such as drug abuse.
Yes, very much so. Functioning multitasking. So that's another thing that you kind of got to go through is to have a routine with your alters. Like you got to get them to function and do things that they're supposed to be doing instead of comparing themselves to the past.
Sure, absolutely.
Deborah Bray Haddock also, like Colin Ross and some of the other books, she does the BPD versus DID. So she has like a whole chapter on
That's so
BPD and the switching issues even in BPD.
Wow.
So early diagnostics, basic models, switching reactions. She even talks about normal switching issues, which, switching happens, so it's common with DID.
Right.
And she even gives tests for DID.
Wow.
DES, SDQ20, DDIS with Ross.
Very nice.
So again, here we are. We have a completely different doctor, and they're collabing with Ross.
Wow.
He's kind of like their their advisor.
Sure.
You know, they're going to ask him questions and they want to understand things. And that's the thing. Just like us having this interview, some of these people that write these books, they're not going to agree with everything Colin Ross says.
Sure.
They're going to have their different way of doing things, but the idea is to heal the person. You know?
Right. Different perspectives, different opinions. We'd love to have any
Exactly.
discussion about it.
Exactly. Does trauma work? Co-consciousness. That's a tough one. I'll admit
Yeah.
that. Defenses with alters.
Wow.
We have that issue. We're still dealing with some of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Disassociation from pain. So in this chapter, it's something I personally deal with, and I'm sure a lot of other systems do. The thing is, when you self-harm, alters will shut off your feelings from it. So like you can be, and I'm not trying to get into too much detail, but you can be dying from hurting yourself and not even know it until you come to. And that's the scary part. So that's why therapists talk about that one step where they have to stabilize a patient before they get into the trauma.
Sure.
Because they want to make sure that they don't, harm themselves or pass away.
Wow.
And there's also working with a roll call check. Roll call check in therapy, if I remember right, is basically kind of checking on every alter to see how they're doing.
Wow.
Because alters can have depression, they can have suicidal ideation, they can have anxiety, insomnia, just like,
Yeah, absolutely.
it's crazy. Working with parts and how to self-help even your spouses. So this one says survival tips for significant others and therapists too. So this actually, if you want to show that, gives pretty much a whole chapter almost on, having somebody support you.
That's amazing.
And again, this book is really highly recommended. A lot of people said, "Oh, I've read that. It's really great." So it seems to be kind of popular with a lot of people that have DID.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
This condition has been fraught with controversy and skepticism. Often the greatest challenge for a person with DID is overcoming society's general misunderstanding of alters or multiple personalities and how they are treated and resolved. Once believed to be a rare and dramatic aberration, DID is actually highly evolved survival mechanism acquired by some individuals as they cope with severe prolonged trauma, abuse, and fear. Written from the patient's perspective, the DID sourcebook is an amenity, practical, and sensitive guide for a person with DID disorders, their families, and their therapists. The author provides an empowering message of hope as she skillfully explains how to find work with an appropriate therapist, the phase of treatment, including many useful exercises and tools for sharing information, managing feelings, and setting up basic safety plans, the benefits and challenges of both individuals and group therapies, learning how to trust again so that you can move out of therapy and into critical process of stabilization. Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And the nice thing is it's not a very thick book. So,
Right.
you could probably read it in like 2 or 3 weeks,
He seems likable from what I've seen in his lectures online. His POV is straight and to the point. Absolutely. I agree with that.
I like that. Yeah.
Very nice. I recommend.
Troops. Fangirling. Aw.
Over Colin Ross.
Yeah. And then Pano Peg says he seems likable for...
He seems likable from what I've seen in his lecture videos.
Yeah. I said he's very caring, and he'll talk about his patients
It's
in that
important
manner.
with doctors to be a little bit empathetic.
Well, and I remember one lecture he was giving, how he talked about how he because he's a male therapist and he's dealing with female patients, he can't cross that boundary to where you can hug a patient or anything. Some therapists do when it's the same sex, but like with male doctors, they have to be careful. So Colin Rossi feels so deeply about his patients, and he was talking on one of his lectures about how he'd ask, do you want me to hold your hand while you're talking about this? Are you okay?
Amazing.
He's very caring, yet he keeps a very professional stance, which is something I really respect.
Equally as important.
Yeah. This is a thick one, guys.
Yeah.
This is a really thick one. I think it is. And this is done by, believe it or not, 3 or 4 different therapists. And we're at... Well, if we can combine all 4 of these together if you think we got to cut her short.
We're good.
We're good. And this one's at about 540 pages. I didn't add in the index in the back because, nobody ever reads that much.
Right.
But this is about the editors. They're all MDs and PhDs, and there's 3 of them.
Yeah, that's the thing, is like multiple doctors were collabing on their own different opinions and observations.
And I think I'm going to let you read the little tablets on this one to see where they go. Oh, they even got a section on Colin Ross.
Real psychological arguments among each other. Correspondence, reactions, and replies.
It's funny how I tab everything so you can look through.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
I
like
mean, there's an entire
that's like
section on Colin.
That's a thick. I mean, that's got to be what, 30 pages?
Yeah, that's an entire
of
book
Colin
on
Ross.
And then we've got the how do you pronounce this? Paragram? It's
Paradigm,
yeah,
I think.
paradigm.
Big therapy words.
Yeah.
And we're not therapists, so it's hard to say their words.
Yeah, so you can learn more about that. You've got effects of trauma on neuropsychological functioning and memory. Okay.
Yeah.
Understanding memory of DID.
My therapist liked that chapter.
Yeah. It says therapists thought it was very good info. That's amazing. Treatment of trauma and dissociative identity disorder patients. That's amazing.
Yeah.
What do we got here?
And if you guys have any questions, if you hear something we're reading and you want to know more about it or you want us to read a section, we will.
We got the diagnosis of dissociative identity disorder.
And the thing is, it's funny how many therapists actually have this book in their
Yeah, I've seen this
in their
one.
office.
This is familiar. Wow, it goes another long.
Well, and again, they got it again, how they BPD versus DID. It seems like every book we have looked at so far has a comparison.
Yeah, absolutely, because, I mean, I'd like to see DID compared to other dissociative disorders, too.
Yeah. The thing that I've noticed, though, with all these books is I'd like to know more of why they do not mention OSDD in these books.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that needs to be definitely brought into light, because if there is something different, obviously they talk about online the difference between OSDD and DID, but they don't put it in the books.
Yeah.
And they don't talk about it much in documentaries either. So
there's controversies surrounding DID. There's a chapter on that.
Oh, that's by Richard Kluft too. Ha ha ha.
Yes.
And I think we just did a book on him just a little bit ago.
People can fantasize it or have skepticism about it. Those are both controversies surrounding DID. A lot of people who are questioning DID are senior persons, it says here.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems to be more the older generation that they're so set on their old model ways, and me and like you, we're open to see the old ways and the new ways and combine them.
That's amazing. Yeah. Hypnosis, would it work? Yeah, what do you feel about hypnosis?
Hypnosis, I think, is some doctors still do it.
Right.
But the thing is, Michelle, EMDR has a similar effect.
I mean,
here's the thing with EMDR.
Yeah.
EMDR, and I'm not going to go into too much detail because I don't know if I'm supposed to or not.
Sure.
But I will give one aspect of EMDR. EMDR is like having hypnosis, but you have awareness of it happening. Hypnosis is more of a sleep mechanism to where you're kind of put in a half sleep, half awake mode, which could depict your memories out. So I find EMDR to be a more updated, more useful method that is based on hypnosis. I think that's just my personal opinion.
Gotcha. Misadventures. Sorry.
Although I was going to say, although I did question it and ask my therapist, do you think we should be trying this? She's like, no, I'm not. We're going to stick with what is up to date. So,
That's okay. Always ask your therapist.
Always ask your therapist, yes.
Misalliances and misadventures in the treatment of dissociative disorders. That's hard to be.
Yes.
I mean, I was reading one of your books. It says something around, I don't want to make a percentage because I don't know, but like a large percentage of people with DID were misdiagnosed with schizophrenia.
Yes, it's a huge thing, and that and schizophrenic symptoms, manicism, all that, and some people actually, and I'm not gonna say exactly, but I know some people that have had this issue, and based on state and the insurance and all that. Even doctors, there's some doctors who are giving medication and they're not trained in DID.
Exactly. That's
concerning because you're actually hurting that person more without giving them.
How could you help them if you don't know?
Exactly. It's sad.
Yeah.
Because some people will not get the treatment that they deserve because of the depiction of DID.
Absolutely. It's schizophrenia. Put them on antipsychotics.
Yeah, exactly, without even testing to see if there's DID symptoms, you know.
We've got Current Treatment for Dissociative Identity Disorder by Colin A. Ross.
Yep.
Love it.
So I said he's pretty big. You know, and the thing is, if you don't like Colin Ross, I'm going to point out again, follow those that do his work, you know. Like I said, there's Robertson, there's Caroline Spring, there's Melissa Kaufman, James G. Friesen, we have James L. Spira, you know, there's so many other doctors that do the work he does based on his trauma model theory and reparenting role.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. This is important, I feel, for
It's a thick one, yeah. Yeah, I really adore that book, and I've read over it lots of times just to help educate on some of what's in it. I wish they'd do an updated version. I keep waiting.
Yeah?
I want an updated version.
Definitely recommend.
And another one was based on, and they called it MPD, and that was done by Ross. But the thing is, even though it's an older book and they call it multiple personality disorder, the knowledge in here about PTSD and even the signs and symptoms and learning trust, it's an older book, but it helps establish a relationship with your therapist. So I'll be honest with you, this book here, even though it's older, it helps to give you trust with your therapist, and it helps your therapist understand you when you can't speak.
Absolutely. I mean, there's criteria in here. There's talking about rarity, which, I mean, I think that opinion has changed over time.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
The rarity, it used to be like 1 in 50,000 was the estimate.
Yeah.
So, self-destructive behavior is very common in MPD. Of the 236 cases in this study, 72% had attempted suicide and 2.1 had killed themselves.
Yeah, that's a high rate.
There were self-destructive behaviors were the most common, and drug overdose was 68%. Self-inflicted burns or injuries, 56%.
Well, and that's something I think a lot of people don't talk about is the drug use and the alcohol use. And there's a lot of ways people don't know how to deal with their DID.
Yeah.
So they will drug induce it or they'll have issues with it. But sometimes that can be an action on your part that can give you a false diagnosis.
Right.
You know,
people, drug use, you can't, like, can you be diagnosed with?
Well, according to what I know about it, is you are supposed to be off all
Correct.
drugs. Some medications are needed, but I've had it to where they'll say, okay, we're taking you off this, because I was on antidepressants.
Right.
And they decided it was harming me, it wasn't helping me, so they took me off of it. Did I have more anxiety? Did I have issues? Yes, but it also showed that I was more aware of my DID when I had the assessments. So, there are things, there's always going to be controversy over what's okay and what isn't.
Sure.
And again, it's the same with the how do I put that without POT issue,
Right.
and a lot of people find it's helpful.
Yeah.
But then the question is, does a person stay off it till they get done with their diagnosis? I
Yeah.
think that's probably best. If you are using self-medication, it's
Right.
best to just get off of it, let them get through the assessments before, your doctor or therapist decide that it's okay to proceed.
And substance abuse counseling.
Yeah, exactly.
There's fears of mirrors.
Yes, there are some systems that have fears of mirrors, quite a few of them actually, because it's an altercation in your identity.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people find deterring from mirrors is, easier to deal with their DID. I personally have gone through that experience where I have alters because of abuse and mirrors being used for abuse.
Sure.
That I find certain parts of us can't be around mirrors.
Wow.
As time went on in the integration process with dealing with some of my trauma, it's not as hard, and I can look in it and I can put my makeup on now. Will the mirror do this little shimmy thing where I see a part of me that I don't? Yes. It's actually really odd because it's like you kind of half see yourself, and all of a sudden your panic goes up a little bit, and you're kind of seeing another part of yourself, and you're like, all right,
Wow.
step back. I'll go back in a minute.
Okay.
Kind of thing.
This says, while in the dissociative state, people may look spaced out as if they are daydreaming. A person may be non-specifically blanked out, or an intense detailed interaction between alters may be going on. I didn't know that when you're dissociating, you might actually be communicating.
Yep. My therapist will actually, it's kind of funny because she will do that. She'll say, "Who are you talking to? Who are you listening to?"
What?
Yes, because I will get that blank stare, and she's like, the first thing she'll ask is, "Are you still with me?" And I'll either nod my head because alter will not let me speak.
Right.
And she'll say, "Are you having an argument?" And I'll shake my head yes when I have that stare off. And she'll ask questions to try to get what's going on, with the situation kind of deal. So
Absolutely. Changes in handwriting frequently occur with MPD.
Yep.
Wait, few patients speak to, in my experience, few patients speak in the way of describing themselves as we or us,
Yes.
talking about themselves before entering therapy, at least not on a habitual basis. Speaking about oneself in this way can't happen if its presenting personality is unaware of the existence of other personalities, which is often in the case at diagnosis.
Very true.
Wow.
Very, very true. And that's what people don't talk about. A lot of people, I think that's the issue is usually people with DID don't want to separate, how do I put this lightly without offending? Each alter does have a name. Each alter
Sure.
does have an identity. But alters are there to protect you, so they don't want to be identified.
Wow.
So
Right.
most of the time,
Covert.
they don't want to be known.
Right.
I'll give you an example. My therapist goes with me to my doctor's appointments. And my doctor is not, my physical doctor is not knowledgeable on DID as much as my therapist, obviously.
Sure.
And because of the new trend, she come out and said, "Who's speaking?" And I was not myself at that time. And my therapist said, my response was, "That's confidential. We don't talk about that."
Yeah.
The alter just looked at her very seriously and said that. And when my therapist told me that, I felt shame. I was like, "Oh God, I'm so sorry." She's like, "It's okay. It's okay." So, unless an alter trusts somebody, most percent of the time, they don't want to give their identity out.
I mean, yeah, with my small experience being here, it seems like when you switch, that alter doesn't want to be known that they
Yes.
are who they are.
Yes. Yeah. Now, my children and my husband, they'll know who it is because they've been around it their whole lives. But like somebody that's not here 24/7, they won't acknowledge who they are. They identify as Eva or they
Right.
identify as me, I, and when they're speaking, they'll say I. Each of them is in a different I stance, but, it's.
Absolutely. I mean, this talks about child personalities.
Yep.
Um,
Their charts are really neat in there too. They have so much in this book. What I like is they even give like categories, like clinical features. They give like categories on things. You can circle. If you notice, and Michelle can show this
Sure.
to you guys, when I was doing my work, I would write my alters' names, which are numbers, in the book.
Wow.
So you can see where I'm working and I'm trying to figure out what relates to who. Because I have partial awareness. I'm like, okay, I want to figure out which one meets with this standard so I can help them.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
I didn't even notice that. That's, wow. I mean, there's these questions like, I love my parents, but she hates them. The answer could be, she is the bad one. You have to get rid of her. Nobody could ever be friends with her or like me, or she wants to hurt me. And then you put which alter has which.
I did. Because all alters are going to answer differently,
Wow.
with as far as like parents or how they feel about something.
BPD
Yep.
is one of the most controversial diagnoses in psychiatry. I mean, yeah, it was interesting how they talk about BPD so much in these
Every
DID
book.
books.
Every book. Because they're so closely related.
Right.
And if I remember right, I do believe the therapy is very similar,
Mm. Oh, sorry, y'all. Okay. That's so cool.
Yeah.
I'll put that back in there.
I do that all the time too. Take tab out and I'm like, okay, I need to see this or work on this.
There's chapter 9 on treatment outcomes.
Yep. I said there's different treatment outcomes. There's different ways of treating, all of it. And in each age and each alter has a different treatment.
Yeah. It's incredible.
Can you imagine the overwhelmingness for a therapist to have to figure out treatment for each individual?
Oh my God, you're right.
It's a lot of work. That's why a lot of people don't want to get into the field of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Phases in psychotherapy, learning trust.
Yep. Huge issue. I always tell everybody, people had asked me about how I dealt with the trust issue. And I have been through numerous therapists, some that have crossed boundaries they shouldn't have, some that couldn't do the work,
Sure.
some that didn't have the knowledge. And I tell everybody the same thing. If in a year's time, if you have a new therapist, in a year's time, hypothetically thinking, if you could trust your therapist with your child or your pet
Wow.
to babysit them, you've reached a line of trust.
Yeah.
Hypothetical thinking. It seems to be a pretty good thing because it seems like that's how it's been helping quite a few people to think that way.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about when touching an altar, it's usually great to get permission first. It's all right, you're safe now when talking to frightened child alters. Wow.
Yeah.
Because they might still be living constantly back when they were created.
Oh, yes. Well, and that's the thing. You got a demonstration of that, how Alter 6 could not, she does, and we can be open and honest about that, where she didn't even know who you were. She actually thought you were somebody from her time period.
Yeah. A girl she went to school
A
with.
girl she went to school with. Because my daughter, my oldest daughter was with Michelle when this had took place, and my oldest daughter, because my alters don't know how, my littles do not know how to use a phone very well, and my oldest daughter had texted Michelle, hey, 6 is out, because I don't have control over that kind of switching. And Michelle had gotten the experience of meeting 6, and she had no idea who she was. She didn't. And that's the other thing I noticed with alters too, my daughter had stated, my therapist states, is they don't make eye contact.
Right.
They don't look at you. They don't want to see the outside world because it's unfamiliar to them. So they're stuck in that stance. They'll touch toys and things that are from that present time period, but they don't want to detour from what they feel comfortable with.
Sure. Absolutely.
So.
Persecutors are often very resentful of the therapist interfering with or treading on their turf. They see therapy as implying that they are failures at taking care of the body or her. This cognitive error can be addressed directly. Simple statements to the effect that everyone needs a hand sometimes can help. And you put an alter down that could help with.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
that's really cool.
Yeah, it's weird how I've even gone back in these books and you'll see my writing to where I will add an alter trying to figure them out. You know, the idea is to put them together, not separate them, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you'll see, that's the cool thing about these books too, is I'll put question marks. I'll be circling something, I'll put a question mark, and then I'll take the book to my therapist and she'll be like, okay, I got this marked. Please read this and give me an answer.
Yeah.
You know?
Fair. Age progression and age regression.
Yes. Well, and there's a lot of theory and issues going on with age regression and regression, or age aggression and regression, because some people find that littles can drive or do things, and you know, the conflict of that I think needs to be looked at more, because you've seen how my littles are, and I've seen how other littles are, and you know, with other systems that I've spoke to, most percent of the time I've when I talk to other people that are diagnosed, their littles are not capable of adult things.
Absolutely.
You know, they're children.
Involving spouses and friends. Wow.
Yes.
In therapy. That's important.
Yep. And we definitely established that, that my husband and children go to therapy.
Oh, and then there's these questions here.
Yeah, it's cool how they have these little questionnaires right in the book. And you can see I've gotten my hand in it, circling and
Abdominal pain and things like that.
Oh yeah, they talk about the physical ailments.
I might check the battery though. I'm kind of worried.
That's fine. Yeah, we only have these two left, which I can kind of just, and this one's more on MPD, but
I'm on 13%.
okay. Well, should we kind of call her quits then with everybody?
We can finish up the last two books.
This one's more of, I didn't find this one as useful. I mean, it's good, but it's more on satanic ritual abuse. So if you want to do satanic ritual abuse, this is an older version. It's called MPD.
Sure.
And it's done by Dr. James G. Friesen. And there's a little bit on the back if you want to go through that. And then this will be the last one.
An excellent but naturally anecdotal, subjective book on a major frontier for both religion and psychiatry, pointing out the desperate need for scientific research on the subject of demonic possessions in all of its ramifications. When will we listen? When are we going to get serious about looking at this reality? Jim Friesen's clinical expertise and spiritual maturity put him at the forefront of those therapists working with MPD. This book will educate, amaze, and inspire you.
Yeah, so if you've had ritual abuse, I found some of it kind of useful. But I should have added that in when we were doing the religious stuff, but I forgot.
Right.
So, and that's it's not a bad book. I found it somewhat useful. You can see some markings in there, but this one is more of a psychology, and it's actually part of a volume set, and it's called Treating Dissociative Identity Disorder by James L. Spira. Oh, he's the editor. And general editor Irvine D. Yellman.
Wow.
And both their pictures. So you got two people working together about this. And as you can see, this one's pretty well gone through, so I'll let you play with that one. And
yeah, this one's another big one that I've seen a lot around. So, this is more of the diagnostics.
well, and again, you see I'm marking like my alters. I'll put alter 14, alter 12, because I put a page related to that alter, which is hence why I push reading so much.
Absolutely. Dissociative abilities. Escaping from current situation involves dissociative suspension of awareness of current time, space, logic, and other self-distinction. This can be a useful skill when attempting to recall an important memory, or in reducing pain in the dentist chair, or when focusing completely on a chess game. Dissociation. Oh,
I thought it froze up. Never mind.
oh no, it's okay. In the case of a person with DID, given the ability to dissociate coupled with the need for continuality, dissociate for years of continual abuse, such as the tendency to not consciously develop useful skills, but instead arose deeply ingrained style. Wow. Outpatient, communicating with alters.
You know what's weird? I've actually heard some people say that they find if they get an inpatient stay, that they actually get a better diagnosis.
What is the name of the blue book we were reading?
The blue book is...
We'll have it all in the description.
this here. Can they see that?
Let's check. Yeah.
And it's an older book, but I find it strangely interesting that most therapists and psychologists have it on their shelves.
Yeah.
Because there's so much in it that it's very helpful. It's the same with this one that Michelle's going through. That one's very useful too. And this one's done by Colin Ross.
Wow. Okay.
So
Great. Thank you. Let's see. Therapists. The experimentation role of
well, that's a good part. That's a good one. Role of therapist, where it actually talks about the role of how therapists should be when treating DID.
Awesome. It's a fundamental to the healing process.
Yes.
What is this? Properties for therapists. That's nice. Yeah. Always
Is it perspective?
Oh yeah.
Perspectives for therapists. So basically, it's telling things about, and you can see I put very good,
Right.
Because it had a lot about the DID and how to distribution of personalities across the models, all that.
Absolutely. That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Medication misuse by alters.
Yes, alters can misuse medication. They can try to overdose. They can try to. So, a lot of times medication, some can be useful. Like for me, I have to take a Xanax if it gets to that 3-4 day mark where
Sure.
I'm not getting sleep and whatnot. But who's to say that they won't try to retake it? So my therapist has taught the alters that a certain time something has to be taken and you have to take it. So
Yeah.
they all will either use alarms on your phone. You can use calendars, notebooks. For years, we've been down this road of sticky notes, as you can see.
Yes, this is
the sticky
helpful.
note thing. Because before I had a cell phone, which I've only had a cell phone in about 2 years.
Okay.
It took me a while to get used to it. We use sticky notes everywhere. Stick it on the mirror, whichever,
Amazing.
Or my kids or my husband would help remind me. You can involve your family too to help. Or here's the coolest part. I've actually had where my therapist will send a reminder to my phone. You need to take this or you need to be here at this time.
That's amazing.
So, and it's a simple thing, you don't have to respond, but it's there.
Sure. Sleep problems with alters, it talks all about multiple ways, like inquire through the host personality whether a specific alter is involved with the sleep problem.
Yeah.
The answer is almost invariably yes.
Yes.
So yeah, there's a lot about that too.
Oh yeah.
It's pretty cool. Short-term managed care.
Yep.
DID is a disorder of defense, splitting,
Yes.
dissociation, and regression. Splitting is a good topic for the future.
I said the cool thing is this one had a lot of stuff too, but this book doesn't cover what that book covers.
Yeah.
So you kind of get a perspective, and they're both different. Even though they believe in each other, they both have different perspectives of DID.
Sure. Amazing. Yeah, it's just all about splitting. Identity problems with DID, that's a big one. 'Cause
Yes.
I always thought DID was when you have distinct personalities, but actually you can feel like you have a lack of
Yes.
identity. Use of hypnosis, that's another
Yeah.
good topic.
Yep. So I said some do, some don't.
Adequate hospital treatment, because
Yes.
it'll be
The thing is, if a hospital does not have, if an inpatient care facility does not have somebody that is at least got some specialization in DID, that person should not be sent there.
Right.
Should not. Because otherwise they're going to be given wrong medication, alters could pop out, they could be treated wrongly, and that could be a huge issue. It could lead to that person not being okay or being more traumatized,
Yeah. Short-term problem-oriented inpatient treatments by Colin Rose. Oh, and then we've got this, all of these different...
Yep. I started filling it out, as you can see, but I never finished it.
Wow, that's so cool. Yeah. Medications, talking about benzodiazepines, anger management.
Yeah. Well, and something that I don't see a lot of, I hope therapists are more inclined to bring up, is craniosacral therapy. I haven't started it yet because I'm still dealing with the whole don't touch me thing going on.
Right.
But I hear a lot of people talk really good about it, and I want to give it a try. And I'm thinking, as soon as I get maybe a little more calmer and maybe a little more integration or partial awareness, I would like to give it a try. Because the idea is to calm the body, to soothe those problems to
Right.
where alters are causing this malfunction in your nervous system, you know,
Yeah.
and your body's functioning right down to IBS and thyroid issues and POTS and fibro and all that.
Absolutely.
So,
That's great. Yeah, I recommend them. That's amazing.
yeah, that's a good one. I really enjoyed that one. Yeah.
Man.
Wow, we got through all of them.
That's so exciting. I'm so happy. I was like, I don't know if we're going to get through all of them.
I was kind of wondering the same thing. I was like, all right, let's put these two together. But
Yeah, that was amazing. And, if anyone has looking for any books that they're interested in reading, I hope this gave you kind of an idea.
well, and I'll be having some newer ones. I've been doing
Sure.
a lot of ordering. It's just I have to read through them first. So
That's fair. Yeah,
you will get updates on my channel with newer books. So,
Yeah, but
most of the time I find that the newer information is online. So, a lot of it I find through like Psychology Today, NAMI,
sure.
and if you follow these, if you kind of do some stalking on these therapists and doctors, you find a lot of information that they put out there, videos. Like I said, Colin Ross is heavily into doing these live chats.
Wow.
And the stuff he talks about is amazing.
Amazing.
So, yeah. Same with Melissa Kaufman. I've seen her. Christine Cortez, they're switching to they're updating.
Yeah, exactly. It's always progressing is the thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm so grateful to have you on my channel to be able to give actual, resources about DID.
Absolutely.
Or trauma and all of these
Absolutely.
things we talked about.
Yeah.
So yeah, I really appreciate you hanging out with me, coming on my channel.
You're
having
very
me
welcome.
over. I'm probably let me end the live.
It's okay.
But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Have a fabulous day. Peace out. Okay.